Can the New Orleans Saints continue their scorching start to the NFL season in Week 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles? And are we about to see a kicker battle for the potential game of the week in Dallas? All that and more coming up. The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 3 of the NFL season is officially here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome in to the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, one of the many NFL experts here on our network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. From the primetime game of Chiefs and Falcons to the big 425 matchup in Dallas between the Cowboys and the Ravens, to why that Saints and Eagles game could be really, really good this weekend. We're going to go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day. We'll be going across our crossover Thursdays in the segments where our hosts and local experts talk about the keys to victory and predictions for each and every game. So we're going to start off with the Philadelphia Eagles and New Orleans Saints. Philadelphia coming off of a tough primetime loss of the Atlanta Falcons, while on the Saints side of things, Derek Carr and that Saints team are scorching right now. Gino Camilleri of Locked On Eagles and Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints take you through everything you need to know and how each team can pull off a win.
All right, y'all, it is Crossover Thursday here, Locked On Eagles and Locked On Saints. That's Gino Camilleri. I'm Ross Jackson. This Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Eagles and Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, as well as all of our crossover content here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Go to prizepicks.com/Locked On NFL and use code in all lowercase Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, so Gino, what is it that the Philadelphia Eagles need to do to get a win against the New Orleans Saints on Sunday?
The LOE 3 keys to victory. Number one, as I said, find a way to make that Saints offense be off key one way or another. Put them behind the sticks. They cannot be in second and short, third and short, because that's when you set up those downfield shots, which sets up their explosive offense, which allows them to put up as many points as they've had the last 2 weeks. Number two, start fast. The Eagles, they have started slower than anyone in the first 2 weeks. Their first 2 possessions in back-to-back games went interception, fumble, punt, turnover on downs. They have not scored any points on their first 2 possessions in either of those games. It would be nice to get at least a field goal there. Number 3, play 60 minutes. Not 58, not 59, 60 minutes. Because if you can allow the 7th most improbable comeback in the next-gen stats era since 2016 against Kirk Cousins on one leg, what can this New Orleans Saints team do to you?
That's big. That's big. And look, that I love your first 2 there in particular. They stand out to me because of how much they relate to one another, right? Like the New Orleans Saints in the first 2 games, as you highlighted, 15 straight possessions with their first team defense on the field, scoring points, right? And that included 6 of 6 to start against Dallas on touchdowns in AT&T Stadium. And so the Saints all of a sudden, and Gino, this has not been the case in New Orleans for the past, I'll say about 3 years. They have not been a fast start offense. They have been a late push offense as of late. And all of a sudden that has changed under offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. Derek Carr playing at a whole nother level right now. And so, yeah, I think that like that, making them play from behind the sticks, giving them those 3rd and longs, which I don't think the Saints saw a 3rd and long last week against Dallas until I believe it was the 4th quarter. And it was like a 3rd and 12. So it was a considerable 3rd and long at that point. But there's that. And then coupled with Philly struggles early on, like there's an opportunity here for New Orleans to continue to open up an early lead, which has really propelled them over the course of the past 2 weeks. So the only team in the NFL, I believe right now, that has not trailed in a game so far through the first couple of weeks. So I think that those are huge. I love those highlights from you.
And you have to start fast, especially if it's going to be a shootout, Ross, because if you can go 6 straight possessions of getting touchdowns, even if half of them are touchdowns, half of them are field goals,
sure,
you're still talking about 30 points, and that's a good offense in the NFL. And we've talked about at Locked On Eagles, 35 points should be what this Eagles offense aspires to be each and every week. They were a point off of that week 1. Last week got a little slow, but one of the things that in my mind is head scratching with the Saints, the amount of offensive touchdowns in the sport is down dramatically over the last few years.
It's
and New
insane.
Orleans is still putting up an egregious amount of touchdowns. It does not make any sense.
It's such an outlier. And that's one of the reasons why we're all kind of watching and going like, okay, so when does it settle down and what does it settle down to? Because I think everyone's accepted like, okay, 3 straight games of 40 plus points. If you go back to week 18 of the 2023 season, this is abnormal. At some point, it's got to settle down to, but exactly what it settles down to could still be winning football for New Orleans. We just kind of have to see what that's going to be. So I love that. So yours is the LOE 3 over there at Locked On Eagles. I'm going to give you 3 of my Jackson 5, which is what mine are over at Locked On Saints. So we both have a lot of fun. So number 1 for me is stopping the run and making plays at the quarterback. If they don't do this, the Saints will probably end up like very close to, if not losing this game. Like this is the spoiler for New Orleans, is if they don't do that. That's why that's number 1 to me. I have a lot of faith in New Orleans. I pick New Orleans for this game, all that kind of stuff. I think that they're like on a roll and it's going to continue here, but that's the big key for me in terms of what can decimate New Orleans' hopes of going 3-0 for this one. Number 2 for me is keeping and playing to their offensive identity, as we were just discussing. There's no need to complicate things here. Just do the things that work. They line up in a lot of 12 personnel. They love their 2 tight ends. They use a lot of 21 as well, which would be 2 running backs, and they dabble, I'll say, in 3 wide receiver sets. But for the most part, what they want to do is run the football, win with their offensive line in the trenches, give help to their offensive line with their very multiple tight ends, multiple in that they can do a lot of different things. I'll say versatile tight ends is probably more appropriate. And then, as you mentioned before, threaten deep with 2 sub-4-4 guys. That's what they want to do as an offense. That's what they'll need to do as an offense. And then finally, I think number 3 for me is stealing a possession or a score. That could be a special teams touchdown. That could be a defense, creating some turnovers, things like that. I think that will allow you to get off to a fast start.
One thing I said on the crossover last week to host Aaron Freeman is that with those 2 veteran safeties they have there in Atlanta, those guys that love to play with their eyes to the quarterback and almost like this poacher hunter type of role, the Eagles got 2 guys this week that you're going to have to worry about as well. The Saints have some good safeties. So if you want some opportunities to make plays on the football, Jalen Hurts has been better in the last week throwing the ball, but he still has some balls where you're like, oh, the defender could make a play on that if your wide receiver didn't play cornerback for a second. But it is not great in Philadelphia right now, but I think it goes back to your first point. You have to make plays on Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, because what they did last week, if you look at that 3rd down drop and you look at the interception to Jalen Hurts in a vacuum, yes, it's rough. But to get them to that point where they almost won that football game after a 17-play, 70-yard, 9.5-minute drive to basically grind that game out, it came on the back of Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. Even as badly as their coaches coach, sometimes talent is what you need in the NFL. Yeah. I think this one is going to be close. Like you said, I think the average has to come back down to the middle some point for the Saints. But I think that one big explosive touchdown could be the difference. Like Shaheed can cook, man. He might be the best in the league right now doing that.
Gino, I think you and I both preach that, because I'm sure I've heard you say this before over in Locked On Eagles, but the game in the NFL, particularly against 2 good teams, comes down to 1 or 2 plays.
Oh, it always
makes a difference, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's exactly what we end up seeing in this matchup for sure. And it's going to be an exciting one, man. I can't wait for this one. It's going to be a blast.
2 teams with good offensive lines. It comes down to the trenches. They can run the ball. Running the football is back in the National Football League, and I really think it comes down to controlling time of possession, who takes care of the ball, and we're talking about 1930s football here in the year 2024. It's beautiful.
For more on Ross and Gino, check them out over at Locked On Saints and at Locked On Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's take it to Tennessee, where the Green Bay Packers will be facing off against the Tennessee Titans. The big question mark in this one is, will Jordan Love play? Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans take you through what could be a very intriguing game now.
All right, Pete. Gonna get into predictions, but really just predicting what we think makes the big difference in this game. We talked about Malik Willis and the game plan the Packers used. We talked about the Titans and avoiding shooting themselves in the foot, which I've been saying they're not just shooting themselves in the foot. They got a bazooka out and they're just blowing that thing all the way off, man. Like, it's gone. They're losing both their feet so far in these first 2 weeks. But with that being said, I'll get us going here. For me, the big things for the Titans are stop the run. If they stop the run and make Malik Willis beat them, then they're going to be in a good spot. They have to find a way to win the turnover battle. The Titans have lost the turnover battle significantly in the first 2 weeks. The Titans have not forced a turnover on defense yet. You cannot win that way. And then finally, for me, it's no special teams blunders. The Titans can't afford to give the Packers a kick return or a big punt return to help out their offense. They can't afford to have a punt blocked for a third time in a row, which hasn't happened since like the 1930s. All right. They can't afford to make big special teams blunders. And honestly, I think there's going to be a lot of field goals in this game. The Titans can't afford to miss a field goal either. So the Titans have to be the better team on special teams. So stop the run, win the turnover battle, don't blow it on special teams. Those are my 3 keys to victory for the Titans. What are you looking for the Packers side?
I have to just tell you, do you know the number 1 team being bet on the money line this week is in terms of total allocation of dollars?
I got to guess the Packers, right?
Well, okay. So I tricked you. It's the Cleveland Browns over the New York Giants, but second is the Green Bay Packers. 92% of the bets on the money line in this game are on the Packers.
That's not good.
Wild
that's
to
not
me.
Good for the Packers.
No, that's wild to me.
The Titans were the most bet team in week 1, and look how that worked out.
You usually want to fade the public on stuff like this, but I think the reason for this is you're looking at a quarterback that everyone watched in glorious fashion blow almost single-handedly 2 football games for this team.
Right.
And you see a Packers team that just is coming off a coaching clinic from Matt LaFleur.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, in a battle of a game where the coach and the quarterback matter so much, which coach is going to put his quarterback in the best position to avoid losing you the football game? And to me, that looks like Matt LaFleur. So how can Matt LaFleur take this to the next level with Malik Willis while avoiding having to put it on his shoulders to go and win? That's key number 1 for me. Key number 2 is get after Will Levis. You have to. There was a game last year, and Packers fans are going to know what I'm talking about before I even mention it. Monday Night Football against Tommy Cutlets. And it's one of the worst offensive lines any of us have ever seen. And the Packers could not generate juice in that game. They showed up acting like they can just half-ass it and win. And it was bad for them. And they let Tommy DeVito drive them on the final drive of the game, go down and beat them. This is the game where you have to show, if you're Jeff Hafley, we're gonna actually pressure Will Levis, which they didn't do against Jalen Hurts, despite the fact that he was brutal against big blitzes last year. And that these guys can win one-on-one against one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in football. I just had the numbers pulled up here. Nicholas Petit-Frere leads all tackles. He is 61st out of 61 tackles in pressures allowed. Dylan Radins is 54th out of 60 guards in pressures allowed. And Peter Skoronski is 57th out of 60 guards in pressures allowed. This is a game where your pass rush has to win, or I have big questions about, are these players actually as good as we thought they were? Is Kenny Clark playing at the level that he needs to play at, given that he just got a monster extension, that he just had his best ever season sacking the quarterback last year? What's going on there? He's still only like 28 years old, so it's not like he's old and washed. And then the last piece of this is, can you get a playmaker other than the run game to pop? In week 1, It was Jaden Reed. And so can Jason Hirschhorn, my colleague over at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for everyone to subscribe to, wrote about it on Wednesday. I think they're going to build the plane out of Jaden Reed. So is that going to work? And if it doesn't, do you have a plan B? Is there something else you can go to? Matt LaFleur prides himself on the play off of the play. It's not just play 1, it's play 2 when now you're expecting play 1. Can you get to some more traditional play action looks? Can you create some deep shots that isn't just, it's 3rd and 8, F it, Romeo Dobbs down there somewhere kind of things, which is what the one throw that they got that deep down the field. Can you manufacture some of those throws? And can you get someone else other than these running backs to pop for you if you can. I think that you can win. Again, I don't love that the public is so on Green Bay, but I do think they look at the quarterbacks. And that's not going to make me not believe what I think is true on the football field, that this is just a good matchup for Green Bay. And I think that they have a renewed belief. I think they're going to go up. I think they're going to go in. I think they're going to win a close game that I know this for sure, Tyler. One of these fan bases is going to leave this game going, I can't believe we lost that football game. Right. And I think it's going to be the Titans fans, but I would absolutely 100% believe that it's the Packers because of one dumb thing late or one bad throw or one bad penalty. And you're going, I can't believe they blew it. Because frankly, they should have beat the Eagles too. They should be 2-0. And they're not. And so, that's where I am with this game. I don't have a score prediction at the moment, but I don't see a ton of points. The over is also being bet heavily. I don't really see that. I think this is could be one of those 17-14 kind of games.
Honestly, I'm thinking 17-16, even 13-12. I think it's going to be one of those things where, and basically both fan bases think their team's going to pull it out throughout the entire game. And then there's going to be one big critical mistake at the end that somebody makes. And honestly, it's hard not to think that it'll be the Titans after the first 2 weeks. But I think I'm leaning towards the Titans finding a way to pull this out because I think they'll be better against the run than the Colts are. And I would like to see how the Packers perform when they're not running the ball at it. I mean, I wanted to check on this. I don't have the data. I couldn't figure out how to check on it. But when was the last time a team attempted 50-plus rushing attempts? I looked at the top 25 rush attempts, and 25 was 61, and every single instance of it was 1978 or earlier. So I couldn't get down to 53 to see when the last time that happened. But I think if the Packers try to run the same game plan they had last week against the Titans will be able to find a way to pull one out at the end. But I do still think that Will Levis makes dumb plays, and because the Packers will get that pressure and he'll get frazzled and he'll go Carson Wentz. I kept telling people that Will Levis reminds me of Carson Wentz. This was last year, the way that he moves frantically in the pocket, his footwork being so ridiculous and frantic. That's the best way to put it. His feet are just all over the place. No calm, no poise, none of that. And it's because there's pressure on him all the time. And I think that's even worse in week 3. But again, if the Titans defense can hold down the run game,
we'll see. Jordan Love, the big X factor in that Green Bay, Tennessee game. But for more great analysis on the Packers and Titans, be sure to check out Peter over at Locked On Packers and Tyler over at Locked On Titans, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've got a battle of 2-0 teams up next. The Los Angeles Chargers and the Pittsburgh Steelers, both teams looking to improve their record to 3-0. And we have David Drogemeyer of Locked On Chargers alongside Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers as they take you through everything you need to know about this game, the quarterback battle between Justin Herbert and Justin Fields, and a lot more.
We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're not going to get into predictions. We saved that for our Friday shows. That's for that time, and we get to talk with our guests and everything there. But David, let's talk about matchups. That I think we very, very much can do. We're going to do 2 each side. So I want you to lead with your first one. What is the top matchup that you're looking at that you have a circle around and say, hey, the Chargers have to win this one if they have a hope that they hope to win this one?
Yeah, well, I think that the first one's awfully easy for me. I mean, it's your rookie first-round pick, 5th overall, Joe Alt, going up against a defensive player of the year in TJ Watt. I mean, that is a monumental, massive matchup for the Chargers. This is why the Chargers drafted Joe Alt, is for matchups like this, to go up against beasts like him. He did a very, very good job handling Max Crosby in the week 1 game. Didn't allow any pressures, didn't allow any sacks at all. Did a fantastic job in week 2. Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt, 2 of the top tackle duos in the NFL through a couple of weeks. Only a couple of teams have their tackle duos that are ranked higher, according to PFF. So that right there is a matchup that could absolutely decide this game, because we know TJ Watt can wreck the game. So Joe Alt has to do his best to try to keep TJ Watt away from Justin Herbert.
And I think you bring up a good point too, because Rashawn Slater, I mean, again, similar on both sides here. The Steelers have drafted 2 first-round tackles. The Chargers have drafted 2 first-round tackles. Don't sleep on Rashawn Slater. Just because Joe Alt's the new fancy one there. He's a pretty good tackle too.
Oh, Rashawn Slater's given up 1 pressure through 2 games. 1.
That's insane.
And
that's
53
insane.
pass blocking snaps. 1.
Exactly. And here's the thing is that I think the Steelers in a lot of matchups, you face a team, they'll have 1 really good tackle. And if that tackle's on TJ Watt's side, guess what? That means Alex Highsmith's on the other and he's bringing heat. But it's rare to see 2 teams with 2 high pedigree tackles. And that's why I think it's a great choice on your part at seeing how that matchup goes. If the Chargers neutralize the Steelers edge rush, that is a huge point in their favor. My first point I'm going to look at a matchup here is how they attack the Chargers secondary, because you have Asante Samuel at corner and Derwin James at safety. And those are 2 guys that are highly respected. They're guys that bring a lot to the table. Now, the Steelers in week 1, they notably did not even try to target the middle part of the field. Why? Because the Falcons had Jesse Bates. They were trying to say, hey, we're not throwing anywhere near that guy. Don't let him be the turnover creator. Stick to the sidelines. Week 2, they said, you know what? Patrick Surtain, let's throw to the middle part of the field now because he's on the sideline. But now you have a mix of a guy on the outside and a guy that's going to be playing in the middle that you have to honor if you're the Steelers. And that's where I think it's going to be really tricky for this Steelers offense when they want to throw the football, not falling for any traps that the Chargers are setting. And if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm trying to mix up my coverage, man on one side, zone on the other, trying to fool Justin Fields into throwing into a situation where one of my playmaker defensive backs can make a play. That chess match of where those guys are and when the Steelers take their shots, I think that's a key part in this matchup as well.
100% it is. There's no question about it. I think, another guy who's kind of been slept on a little bit is the corner that's on the other side for the Chargers. That's Christian Fulton. Christian Fulton has allowed 3 receptions for 1 yard so far through 2 games. He's been ridiculously good. Obviously, that's not sustainable. We know that. Asante Samuel Jr. has given up some yards, but hasn't really given up any touchdowns. So I want to know who's going to cover George Pickens, because when you're looking at the Steelers offense, obviously Najee Harris is going to get the ball. We know that. We respect his ability to ground and pound. He, the Chargers know how good of a running back he is. He's a bruiser, and the Chargers have a guy like him in Gus Edwards, like that. He's our hammer, and J.K. Dobbins, it's like thunder and lightning, right? The J.K. Dobbins is the lightning, and Gus Edwards is the thunder. And we know Najee Harris is a big thunder type of back. He's a big runner. So I think it's who's going to cover George Pickens. Is it going to be Christian Fulton? Is it Asante Samuel Jr.? And how they fare in that matchup, as well as Derwin James on Freiermuth. I think those 2 right there are the 2 most important matchups for this game defensively for the Chargers.
I hear you on that. I'll switch to the Steelers defense for a second, talking about a key matchup there. We talked about the edge rushers. I think a lot is going to also be determined on the interior in this game.
Oh, no question.
The Steelers have gotten a rejuvenated Cam Hayward. There was a lot of questions. He suffered a groin injury that kind of sidelined him and hobbled him for last year. He's 35 years old. Everyone's like, oh, he's got to hang it up. Well, he went through training camp and the Steelers signed him to a 3-year extension. And it looks like in the first 2 games,
which I think really raised a lot of heads, right? It was like, really? 3-year extension at 35? But
for a guy
so far, wow. He's
been
really
lighting
good.
it up. He's been getting pressures. He's been stuffing the run. And he's been joined this year by a healthy Larry Ogunjobi, who's been playing to the pedigree of what he's getting paid in the salary cap. And he's joined by Keanu Benton, who's also playing very well as a second-round pick out of Wisconsin. You have that rotation along with Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts, Peyton Wilson, all active athletic linebackers that fit this mold of, if this is a physical game, that's what they love to do. They love to be physical. I think that if you go back and you look at the NFL films when they would start to play the big music, when it would just be physical football, you're going to see a lot of that in this game. Linemen getting to the second level, defensive linemen trying to blow up plays, linebackers hitting the hole fast and hard, and running backs having that clash in the hole. That kind of stuff is going to be huge in this game. And how the Steelers' defensive front keeps the linebackers clean, but also gets penetration, that's going to be huge to determine who wins this football game and who wins the ground game, especially when the Chargers have the ball.
I think that's probably the area that I'm most concerned with when I look at this football game is how are the Chargers' interior offensive linemen going to deal with the pure beef that the Pittsburgh Steelers are bringing and the skill level. Obviously, you mentioned Cam Hayward. Cam Hayward is ridiculously good. He's shown it And he's a guy that the Chargers have to try to neutralize as much as they can. He's going to get his. Like, he's a really, really good player. They just got to try to not let him wreck the game. That's the biggest story, is how is Bradley Bozeman, Trey Pipkins, Zion Johnson going to be able to handle the interior of the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line? How they handle him might be as important as how Justin Herbert plays in this game, because they can wreck it. They could stop the run and force Justin Herbert to go out there and do what he hasn't done yet in a new offense, which is go out there and air it out. So this is going to be a really, really fun game to watch, a really physical, hard-nosed game for 60 minutes. I can't wait to watch it.
The Chargers are looking good, but so is that Steelers team. So one team will have to fall, unless obviously there's a tie, but we're going to see which team comes out on top. For more on the Steelers and Chargers, check out Chris and David on the Locked On Steelers and Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here, your team every day. The Minnesota Vikings have been a really intriguing team. Obviously, no J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold being able to will that Vikings team to a very impressive win in Week 2 over the San Francisco 49ers and the Houston Texans. They're a team with C.J. Stroud that's looking poised to compete in the AFC, and especially in that AFC South division. Cody Davis of Locked On Texans and Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings have all the answers you need about the biggest storylines, key matchups, and keys to victory, alongside some players to watch.
Okay, Cody, so tell me, I'm going to tell you right now. In the 2022 draft, I was a big-time Stingley guy. The only reason, I thought that if I had my druthers and I could control what the draft should have been, I would have taken Sauce Gardner first overall and Derek Stingley second overall. And there was a weird chance that he was going to fall in the draft because of injuries, and I was getting so excited that there was this pipe dream of him being a Viking. Didn't even get close. He ends up going to the Texans. Please tell me that I'm vindicated here, because he had kind of a slow start to his career.
No, Derek Stingley Jr. is slowly but surely turning into him. That's all I gotta say.
Makes me happy.
And
I've never been wrong.
I looked at it like this. This is it's Stingley's third year already. Oh my God, where's the time going? His first year, well, of course, let's just go all the way back. Coming in from LSU, the number one concern about Derek Stingley Jr. was the injuries. I mean, everyone know what him, Justin Jefferson, Burrow, everybody, that phenomenal 2019 LSU team did that year. And after that, the next couple of years, Derek Stingley Jr. battled through injuries, hamstring. He has the Liz Frank injury, one of the worst injuries that any athlete can, battle through and stuff. So his rookie season, not only was he trying to get back into just football game speed, but he was also trying to get adjusted to the NFL game speed. And he was playing for a coach at the time, Lovie Smith, who was not calling a defense that suited to his skill set. So rookie season, it's okay. Then I think towards the end, at some point towards his rookie season, went down with a hamstring injury, missed half of that season. So it was okay, rookie season, you throw it out the window. So his sophomore year comes along and you pair him with DeMeco Ryans. Not only is DeMeco Ryans has put together a defensive scheme set that is more accustomed to his best attribute, as a shutdown one-on-one corner, but at the same time, Ryans is also one of the best teachers that he could have developed under. And he goes through his entire sophomore season. We are starting to get a glimpse of Derek Stingley Jr. at LSU. Got hurt once again with a hamstring injury in practice. It just popped up out of nowhere. We literally just seen him 30 minutes ago, stretching and everything. And the next thing you know, he's out for 4 or 5 games or whatever. But when he comes back, he starts to show the potential that made him arguably, if not the best corner in the nation during his time at LSU. And through OTAs, throughout, mandatory minicamp, voluntary minicamp, training camp, preseason, and now through the first 2 games of the season, we are definitely starting to see Derek Stingley Jr. take that leap. And the number one thing that I've basically seen out of him is the fact that I think now he definitely has the confidence to say, you know what, not only am I, a good player in this league, and I hate to say it like this, sorry, Ross, but I'm a damn good cornerback in this league. And And I know he believes in his heart that he could shut down any wide receiver. And I'm just waiting to hear what Stingley has to say about going up against his college teammate and Justin Jefferson. Because
so do you think they're going to one-on-one him here? Because nobody has one-on-one Justin Jefferson in like 2 years. Nobody's had the courage.
I just had this conversation with one of my colleagues a couple hours ago, and he asked me, do you think Derek Stingley Jr. would he feel disrespected if D'Amico and the rest of the coaching staff, would double Justin Jefferson?
Like, are they going to give him safety? If they leave him on an island, this is cinema. Because Jefferson has not had that opportunity in years.
I say Derek Stingley will take it as some form of disrespect, but if I'm D'Amico, especially looking at the trend and the trajectory, and I understand how dangerous Justin Jefferson can be, I truly do believe, man, especially considering with the injuries that Minnesota is dealing with right now on the offensive side of the ball, if Stingley can hold his own against Justin Jefferson, you're looking at a situation where not only Stingley would have an opportunity to finally fully establish himself as
that'd be a breakout game. Yeah,
it's going to be a breakout game, but after that, it's going to have other players on the defensive side of the ball to not worry about Jefferson. Now you have an opportunity to focus on other players who could kind of, have those sneaky good games due to, the opportunities that they're going to have due to injury. So I don't know right now. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. I know D'Amico isn't going to tell us, but
of course
it's interesting, man. It's interesting.
Man, I don't know. Okay, the last time this happened, the last time somebody truly lined up on Justin Jefferson and said, we got a corner that can handle you. It was the Saints. It was Marshawn Lattimore. No slouch. It was 2022 in London. He went off for a $147, including a game-breaking go route that functionally was the dagger of the game. That would be ballsy. But of course I'm rooting to see it. I don't, other than that, we haven't seen anybody even try to one-on-one lock up Jefferson, let alone do it successfully since, and I don't think anybody's really had a good game on him one-on-one truly since his rookie year. Jair Alexander had a great game against him, but with a lot of safety help. So I have to think that that's what the Texans will do. So I want to actually circle back to something else you said, which was establishing the run for the Houston Texans with Joe Mixon, assuming he's healthy. One of the big surprises of the Vikings defense has been their D-line. Not only Grenard and, Van Ginkel doing their thing on the edge, but in the middle, Harrison Phillips playing phenomenal, just signed a 2-year extension. And then guys names you kind of forgot about, like Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery playing well, plus really aggressive linebacker play from Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace next to him. The 49ers ran the ball well on them last week, but the 49ers are the 49ers. So what can the Texans do to break through in a way that, a mortal team like the New York Giants couldn't?
That's going to be interesting to see. Once again, depending on the whole health situation. I'm not expecting Joe Mixon to play. I mean, the way his ankle...
So who is it then?
I was like, that's the thing. Dameon Pierce still dealing with a hamstring injury. I'm not expecting him. So the next, running back that's going to be there is another guy you guys are, somewhat familiar with, is Cam Akers.
Now, oh my God, it's Cam. That's right.
Yeah. So
we were all bummed that it didn't work out. We wanted it, but the physical timing didn't work out because he failed the physical and then he ended up there. So everybody's just pretty bummed about that. We love Cam Akers.
Exactly. And I'm interested to see how is this going to work out with Cam Akers, because look, let me tell you something. I want to say the first full week of training camp took place. It might have been day 4 or whatever. I'm standing there and I look on, the little training practice for, side, that third field nobody wants to go to, and I look and I see somebody working out. It's like, who is that? I don't know. A couple days go by. It's Cam Akers. Next day at training camp, we asked D'Amico, hey, what's the deal with you guys signing Cam Akers? The only thing he said was, we just brought him in here to see if he was going to compete. That was it. It was like, oh, training camp body. Next thing you know,
phone number, Rolodex.
Exactly. The young man didn't even have his name on the back of his jersey, and I think his jersey number was 22 or something. They had a whole other 22 on the defensive side of the ball. That's how
just get the practice jersey from 2 years ago that somebody left in the locker room.
Exactly. And, he wasn't getting no type of reps, doing 11 on 11, 7 on 7, whatever the case might be. He was barely participating in individual drills. Then all of a sudden, the young man just started balling out. And next thing you know, it's like, okay, he'd be on the practice squad. Next thing you know, oh, snap. This man has literally made the 53-man roster. And I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Cam Akers, and can he give this team something in the rushing attack, knowing that Mixon and Dameon Pierce 9 times out of 10 will not be there. Because, Luke, I keep saying this, and maybe this is something, Bobby Sloyd and them going to have to work through, regardless of how good CJ Stroud is, regardless of all the weapons that he got with the wide receivers and the tight end and everything else. If the Texans cannot establish anything in the run, they're still going to struggle a little bit, and we saw it on Sunday. So, as you just alluded to, and I kind of knew this coming in, the Vikings, they still have a pretty good D-line, and I know, especially with Jonathan Grenard, they're going to give the Houston Texans hell in some type of way, but there's a lot riding on Cam Akers' shoulders right now, and I'm just like, okay, can you showcase the same potential and production that we saw during preseason when you was playing against weaker competition? I've always liked Cam Akers. I love what he was doing, before, not one but 2 Achilles injuries, which is crazy to me that he's still playing. Let me just say that. But I'm like, can you do it now in the regular season when you're going up against better talent?
Minnesota Vikings in the middle of a gauntlet right now, coming off the 49ers right into the Texans, and then the Packers next week, as well as the Lions and Rams on the horizon. A lot of playoff teams on the schedule, so we'll see if the Vikings can keep up their unexpected win streak, and we'll see if the Texans can keep up their pretty expected win streak.
Luke and Cody are both great and give you phenomenal insight. And so for Texans and Vikings coverage that is unmatched, be sure to check out both Cody on Locked On Texans and Luke over on Locked On Vikings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Still a ton to talk about in this 1 p.m. slate of games, including Caleb Williams. Can he pick up his first career NFL win against the Indianapolis Colts? All that and more coming up on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and I love going on FanDuel, seeing everything they have to offer. We have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel any time. So the Ravens and Cowboys will face off in a pivotal 425 matchup, and the Ravens open up there is 1.5-point favorite. So if you like that line, head over to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. We are back on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, getting you ready for all of Sunday and Monday's NFL action. I am Kevin Ostreicher, still here with you. We just talked about our first batch of 1 p.m. games, but still a couple more great ones to go here. Caleb Williams will be looking for his first career NFL win. He is currently 0-2, and the Chicago Bears are facing off against the Indianapolis Colts and Anthony Richardson. So Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears and Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts will get you prepared for the game, what you need to know and what you need to look out for.
Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, which is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play 5. All right, Lauren. So again, there's so many things we can tell these two sides to quit making it so difficult on themselves. What are the 3 biggest keys to a Bears win in this one?
Yeah, I think the Texans and then the Packers laid out the winning formula against the Colts for the Chicago Bears here, right? Like it's not that complicated to say, yeah, the Bears need to get the running game going for the first time all season against the worst run defense in football right now. And then if you can get the running game going, that should help problem number 2, solidify the offensive line, find some consistency up front. And if you're running the ball well, then the defense can't key off on getting after Caleb Williams. They have to, pay more attention to the running game. You can work some play action off of that and then open things up in the passing game for Caleb Williams and finally get him going is kind of the number 3 aspect there. So it's all about the running game leads to the better offensive line of play action, which can then lead to more of a solid passing game, because I don't think there's a ton of concern about this Bears defense being able to hold up its end of the bargain. They're going to hold the Colts to a manageable point total that an average offense should be able to surpass. It's just a matter of this offense finally getting going in the way that we've been waiting for it to. And the Colts present a pretty good matchup opportunity that the Bears feel like this can be that opportunity to step forward.
I would agree. I think offensively, that's the thing for me. Establish the run early again, put at least a field goal on the board early so that you're not feeling like you're coming from behind too much to where you have to abandon the run. Get that run going a little bit. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor looked awesome last week up until he was yanked from the game, but allow that to set up play action. Just like you were saying, I don't think they want to take those big plays away from the offense totally. Obviously, no one does, but I think you have to be a little more cognizant when you're playing, this defense that Chicago has, one of the better secondaries in the NFL. But I mean, try and set it up, get that run game going. On paper, having Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the backfield is supposed to scare guys. So make it scary and then take advantage of that and, use play action in your option game to set up big pass plays. But what else do you got from the defensive side for Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about trying to make Anthony Richardson have to do it all for the Colts, right? Put him on the spot to say, you've got to make the plays here. The Bears did a really good job of shutting down Joe Mixon with the Houston offense last week. They had a little trouble week 1 against the Titans, but I think that was a little bit more of like Bears still trying to get their feet back under them to start the season and a little bit less of like a longer term concern about the run defense. But I think the Bears shouldn't have too much trouble keeping things manageable with Jonathan Taylor and then being able to force Anthony Richardson to make plays with his legs and then also like hit big plays downfield, fire into those tight windows, like force him to have to test this Bears secondary because a lot of quarterbacks have struggled with that test. And I think they look at Richardson as a player that, like we talked about earlier, like he's not a guy that's going to make a bunch of boneheaded decisions, but can you get him to attempt to pass and just be inaccurate enough to get that big turnover? Because this defense is fueled by energy. It's the big plays lead to bigger plays for them. It's the big sack leads to then an interception because there's just that juice flowing through them on the back end. But if the Colts can get things going early, you can kind of demoralize that unit a little bit and things can break down a little bit more as well.
Yeah, so I'm looking for the Colts front to kind of fluster Caleb Williams a little bit. I don't know what to expect from the pass rush right now. I thought they did a good job in week 1 against CJ Stroud, 4 sacks, 10 hits. They did not get any sacks last week against Malik Willis. Now that comes with kind of a caveat because that was a very run-heavy approach, a lot of quick throws for Willis, and he's obviously a mobile guy. So you just weren't going to get a full pass rush set against a guy like that. But in this one, I know guys are banged up a little bit, but, Dayo Adangbo is still healthy. Isaiah Land might have to play a little bit in this one. We'll see. Tyquan Lewis is still healthy. Grover Stewart's a no, so he's not going to give you much in terms of pass rush. But, Adetomiwa Adebawore, this might be a big opportunity for him to step up. He's been seeing more snaps. So your main guys are pretty banged up, but the guys who are out there playing are going to have to do something. Like, there can't be excuses. They're going to have to play a lot this year. And so they can't just be ineffective the whole time.
Yeah, if I'm the Colts, like they have to test this Bears offensive line communication in both the running game and the pass rush department, but especially in the pass rush, like passing off stunts, like pretty basic football 101 type offensive line communication. The Bears had a lot of trouble with last week. And then you add in blitzers coming from different directions, and that's where you get into some real problems. And I don't think it was like when you kind of go back and watch Caleb Williams adjust protections at the line of scrimmage, he's calling the mic properly. He seems to be getting guys in the right position. They just haven't been able to really execute on that group. So if I'm the Colts, I'm pressing that button over and over and over again until the Bears prove they can pick that up, pass it off properly, and keep their quarterback safe. Because that has been something that you'd think professional offensive linemen can do, but in Chicago, that's been a little bit too much to ask.
I hear you there. So what's your vibe check on this one? How do you see this one turning out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be low scoring because I think the Bears are going to hold down the Colts offense pretty well. And then it's just a matter of what the Bears offense can actually get going against this Colts defense. So if I had to put a score to it, I think it'll be close. I think it'll be tight. I think it'll be ugly quite a bit, but I'm going to go Bears 20, Colts 16. A lot of field goals in there, but the Bears just get a little bit more, and it's still going to be a one-score game down in the end. No one's gonna cruise away and feel like, this game is firmly in hand, nothing to worry about. But in the end, I think the Bears get the offense going a little bit more than we've seen up to this point, and their defense still gets just enough of a job done there to say, yep, offense doesn't need to score 30, just get to 20, and that's a win.
So I absolutely love that score because I had it 20-16 Colts. So I kind of two extremes on the first week. They scored 27 points week one. They couldn't really get much going last week, so I kind of cut it in the middle for them. I'll give the Colts 20 points, assuming they can have the run game working at least a little bit. But I think they will probably allow the Bears to have the most productive offensive day they've had so far, because there's nothing on the Colts defense right now that tells me it won't happen. They haven't been able to stop the run until the second half of last week, which is great, but it took them going to a bear front. They can't just do these things all the time. Teams will figure out how to attack them. Their secondary is the area we were most concerned about going into the year, but it hasn't even kind of reared its head yet because teams haven't had to pass on them because they're running so much. So I think it is going to be a really close game. Maybe we'll see a lot of mistakes or just lack of execution. I don't think either of these teams are just going to magically fix the problems that have plagued them for the first couple weeks. So I do think the Colts have, just enough of an advantage to give them the narrow win. Again, 20-16. But man, I've not done well picking these games for the Colts so far this year.
The early beginning of this season, everybody's still trying to figure themselves out. The Colts are figuring out what they're going to be. The Bears are going to figure out what they're going to be. And these are not the mid-season forms of these teams just yet. Maybe these two have been even a little slower than some other teams in really getting to where, they want to be at this point of the year. So it's going to be an unpredictable, volatile game with some young teams. And it's one of those things like anything can happen in this one.
Yeah, I think if you fast forwarded this and just put it near the end of the schedule, it might look a little better. Anthony Richardson versus Caleb Williams might have a little more luster than it does right now because, obviously, vibes aren't great around them. People aren't, speaking of them too highly right now. But I'm confident eventually both sides will look a little better than they do right now. But honestly, this could be an entertaining game because it's two sides that struggle, and maybe they'll have success against each other.
We'll see if Caleb can do it. That first win can sometimes feel like it takes forever to get, but Caleb and the Chicago Bears have to get the job done against the Indianapolis Colts for that to be the case. For more on Lauren and on Jake, check them out over at the Locked On Bears and Locked On Colts podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Broncos and Buccaneers face off. Bo Nix versus Baker Mayfield. And we have James Yarko of Locked On Bucks as well as Sarah Bedinger of Locked On Broncos in a game that could be an early season defining game for both these teams. Sarah and James answer the biggest questions for the game and what needs to be looked at ahead of the matchup.
Wrapping things up here on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bucks, Locked On Broncos. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Sarah, what are the three things that the Denver Broncos need to do to get into the win column and pull off a big road upset of their own in Raymond James Stadium this Sunday?
Well, it's going to be three things that they haven't done through the first two games. Number one, they're going to have to run the ball. Number two, they're going to have to force a few turnovers. And number three, they're going to have to be effective and efficient in the red zone. Right now, Broncos are 32nd in the NFL in red zone conversion rate. So obviously they're not scoring touchdowns when they do get to the red zone. And they've been really bad in terms of forcing turnovers at this point in the season. They need to force more turnovers. If your pass rushers are consistently getting to the quarterback as they have been, you might have to pop that ball ball loose. I know it's easier said than done. And then offensively, committing to the running game. Bo Nix has been getting absolutely flamed in the NFL Twitter world these days, as you've seen, I'm sure, James, because the guy's been throwing, I think he's thrown almost 80 passes in the first 2 games. That's kind of ridiculous for a rookie quarterback in his first, 2 NFL starts. The Broncos have not been able to run the ball. Javonte Williams, 1.5 yards a carry against the Steelers last week. Jaleel McLaughlin, not much better, 3 carries for 6 yards. So they have to be able to run the football, and they have to stick to it. They have to commit to it. Stop with these empty sets on 1st and 5 after a penalty by the defense, and you're running empty. You're giving away what you're doing out there. Sean Payton has to help out his rookie quarterback this week and commit to a running game.
Yeah, and look, Sean Payton knows Todd Bowles, and he knows what can work, what should work against a Todd Bowles defense, and that has some Bucs fans concerned because they are more than familiar with Sean Payton and everything that he did while coach of the New Orleans Saints. I realize that the Broncos offense is not what the Saints offense was, but that doesn't mean that there aren't weapons and that they can't expose some of the weaknesses of this Bucs defense, especially with some of the injury problems. But look, the Bucs are looking to move to 3-0 and really be able to solidify themselves in the eyes of the NFL world as contenders. So if they want to win this game, they've got to run the football. They have to get after Bo Nix and take advantage of a backup offensive tackle there in Denver. And the most important thing, do not overlook the Broncos. This Buccaneers rushing attack has not been good so far. It's not time to panic yet, but a combined 40 yards from your 2 running backs against the Detroit Lions last week is not what you want to see. Yes, both Bucky Irving and Rachaad White are dual threats. They were not involved at all in the passing game against the Lions. They have to be involved in the passing game, but they also have to run the ball efficiently against a defense that can give up big chunk plays in the run game. They have a good defensive line, but you get to that second level, and all of a sudden, guys like Rachaad, guys like Bucky, they can make players miss, and they can turn 4-yard gains into explosives. As for the defense, they have to get after Bo Nix. 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, get the pressure in his face, but more importantly, what they didn't do in Detroit is finish the play, get Nix on the ground. The Broncos are coming into this game with a backup right tackle. This is the time for Yaya Diaby to really step up and show the world that hype train that he had all offseason wasn't for nothing. He's gotten pressures, he's forced bad throws, but it's time for him to start bringing down the quarterback. Same thing goes for Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. He has made some impact plays, but he has to bring the quarterback down. Todd Bowles is a master of bringing blitzes. He has to bring pressure from different areas without showing weakness in a beaten up secondary. And then the most important thing to me is do not overlook this Denver Broncos football team. It doesn't matter that it's a rookie quarterback. It doesn't matter that they're 0-2. This has trap game written all over it. And if you overlook this Broncos team, it can spiral out of control. It's real easy for the Buccaneers to look to next week with the Philadelphia Eagles, then a short week against the Atlanta Falcons. Then you have the Saints, the Falcons again. You have Kansas City, San Francisco, Baltimore, all those games coming up. It's real easy to start to look ahead. You have to focus on the task at hand. Send Sean Payton back to Colorado, sad and dejected, something they didn't do very often when he was in the division.
Yeah, and for Broncos country, it's really looking back at it's like almost deja vu. It started 0-2 last year, started 0-2 this year, took a road trip to the state of Florida and came back wondering, all right, what just happened? Is that even real? Or did we just see a game of Madden played in real life, right? When you give up 70 points. I keep bringing that up, James. Commenters are like, let's stop talking about that Dolphins game. It's deja vu. We have to talk about it until it's, until we can completely forget about it. But look, I mean, this is the situation the Broncos are in, right? It's almost like, hey, if you can go to Tampa Bay and show signs of life offensively, or show us that maybe you can actually, like, what can we build on offensively from this game, even if you lose this game, because you're expecting, like, this is a team the Bucs should probably beat in terms of what the Broncos have done, averaging 11 points a game as an offense so far. The Bucs are playing at home. They're obviously a really good team that's got some continuity based on last year. So this is a team in the Denver Broncos that the Bucs should beat. So if you can go in there and catch a victory, as opposed to what happened last year where things spiraled out of control, man, this would be, I hate to say it, as you'd only be 1-2, but for the Broncos, it would kind of be a banner victory early on for Sean Payton this year to be able to go in and beat an old division foe of his from when he was with the New Orleans Saints, as opposed to what happened last year. Things spiral out of control. The Broncos kind of become, are they sellers at the trade deadline? What are they going to do? Like Sean Payton said, these next 2 games for the Broncos, they don't define the season, but they are going to tell a lot about who this team is. And so getting a win on the road this week would be absolutely huge, not just for Sean and the perception of him from this fan base, but man, for Bo Nix as a quarterback to be able to play well in this game, I think that's maybe even more important.
Yeah, and a win by Denver in that situation can spark a run moving forward. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, it could be a banner victory, and it's those kinds of wins that can actually swing things within that facility, with that roster, and really make them start to believe, like, hey, we can go out there and we can hang with anybody, we can beat anybody. And those are the kinds of wins that you see send a team on an upwards trajectory. On the flip side, the Bucs are coming off of one of those types of wins. So losing this game against the Broncos undoes everything that they just did. It takes them out of the contender conversation. It takes them out of saying, like, this team is for real. They surprised people last year getting to the divisional round. Well, now they turn around and lost to a team that they should not have lost to. We talk a lot about stealing victories that you probably shouldn't get, and then losing games that you probably shouldn't lose. The Bucs could see both of those things happen in back-to-back weeks. So it's going to be a really, really interesting one, and I'm going to be fascinated to watch the way that Sean Payton tries to attack the Bucs defense with the weapons that he has in Denver, having known how he used to attack them year after year after year.
Baker's been such a cool story since going to Tampa, his comeback, and Bo Nix obviously hoping to get his first win as an NFL quarterback. So 2 storylines there for sure in that game. For more on Sarah, more on James, check them out over at both Locked On Broncos and Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The last of the 1 p.m. slate, the New York Giants going up against the Cleveland Browns. The Giants are a team that suffered a heartbreaking overtime defeat to their division rival in the Washington Commanders in week number 2. And the Cleveland Browns coming off of a win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, looking to continue that momentum. Patricia Traina and Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Giants and Locked On Browns get you ready for the game.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Browns. He is Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns. I am Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants, and we are going to outline our respective teams' keys to victory. And Jeff, let's start with you.
Well, I think there's a couple things that, point out to me. Look, if I'm bringing up offensive line play, and it's not been where it's been in the past for the Cleveland Browns, worried about guys certainly like Dexter Lawrence, certainly Brian Burns, your other pass rushers for the, Giants. The Browns are going to be tested until this offensive line starts to look like, what has been, the standard here for this team. And I understand it's going to be an offensive line in flux. DeJuan Jones is now entrenched. He is going to be the right tackle from here on. You're not going to take what this young man has done to this point and move him, because the Browns do see a chance where they are going to get some financial relief on that offensive line by having DeJuan Jones there. On the defensive side of the ball, you have to kind of look at what Malik Neighbors does. And I don't think anybody's really surprised. I mean, the polish that he had at LSU, I don't know if it is just an LSU thing, but these guys are definitely emotional players. Certainly covered Jarvis. I've covered Odell. You see Malik Neighbors. You definitely see, some passion to him, the drop, and, basically didn't want to talk to. I mean, nobody needs to be told you drop the ball and say, oh, attaboy. Look, players know what they do and, do right and what they do wrong. But he is going to be somebody. And I think the Browns, look, they have 3 good top corners. So you're going to show him Denzel Ward, who's a top corner in the NFL. You have a burgeoning talent in Martin Emerson. So if there's an opportunity for Martin Emerson to go out there, who's a little more physical, got a little more length, can beat on a guy, you're going to want to lean on the rookie a little bit. That's the way you do it. If you're going to line him up in a slot, Greg Newsome, he'll play some. Greg Newsome plays slot, So you want to keep mixing it up, certainly, on a player like that. And look, I think they're going to be extremely aggressive on Daniel Jones. Look, you don't have to just say, you say Jim Schwartz, it's going to be aggressive anyway. But, there's maybe difference where, hey, it's Patrick Mahomes. We can only be so much aggressive before it bites us in the can. Or it's Daniel Jones. You know what? I'm going to keep attacking him to make him prove that he can, basically make me pay for being this aggressive. They like to play man. They like to rush the passer. It's a simple thing. Obviously, Pat, his time in the Eagles, you've seen this in action plenty times. But those are the two biggest things: is controlling, certainly the New York Giants pass rush, and then if you're the Browns, and this is something they usually do pretty well, is we are going to take your best playmaker away from you and make you find another way to beat us.
Yes, indeed. And, you mentioned the pass rush with Daniel Jones. That's actually something that I'm interested in seeing play out. Now, the Giants offensive line, I said this on my show the other day. I said, Giant fans, if I had told you that the Giants offensive line would actually be ranked not in the bottom third, but actually a little higher, would you believe me? And I haven't checked the responses yet, but the Giants offensive line has been pretty solid. All right. Not top 5 just yet, but it's a case of all 5 guys. It's interesting. All 5 guys, you look at the individual performances outside of maybe Andrew Thomas, all 5 guys are playing, okay, passable, but put them together and they are getting the job done. And that's going to be so important because the Browns have a top 5 pass rush. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Browns are ranked somewhere in the top 5 with total sacks. So that's going to be something, obviously, to keep an eye on. Can they protect Daniel Jones? Because look, when that rush comes at Daniel, he is known to panic. He is known to throw the ball away or to throw it into harm's, a window that he has no business throwing it into. So how is he going to respond to the pass rush if they are able to penetrate the offensive line? That's definitely something to keep an eye on. From the other side of the ball, I guess you can go the same way. Like you said, it all starts in the trenches. Now, the Giants pass rush so far has been kind of quiet. We haven't really seen Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns really come out and, set the league on fire. Sometimes it takes a little startup for that to happen. And then they say sacks and pressures and all that stuff come in bunches. But the Giants are going to need to get after that offensive line of the Cleveland Browns and get into the backfield, rattle Deshaun Watson or whoever ends up playing quarterback and just, take away his options. Because look, the Giants' defensive secondary remains a big, big problem. It really does. They've got Deonte Banks, who's a good young player. Adoree Jackson will probably start now, especially if Cordell Flott is not healthy. If Nick McLeod is not healthy. But that group has been shaky, and they're, that it's just kind of how things kind of worked out with the Giants to where, that front seven of the Giants defense has got to get after the passer and force some mistakes, because the longer these guys have to hold the ball and make plays down the field, the more likely the Giants are going to end up getting in trouble. So we'll have to see about that. And if they can, protect the back end of the defense. And then just real quick, we mentioned before about the Giants with the kicking situation. They have signed Greg Joseph to be their kicker with Graham Gano ailing. So just, thought I would throw that out there. But
former Cleveland Brown.
Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like to me, Jeff, it's going to be a battle of the trenches that's going to going to determine this game. Would you agree?
I would think so. And, certainly, Giants have played obviously on the offensive line good to this point. The Browns hoping to get better in that aspect. So, it's certainly usually most of the time it kind of does come down to that. And then, as both quarterbacks have had their share of mistakes that have cost their team ball games, that's going to be certainly something else that we have to keep your eye on.
All right. Well, both teams need this win. It's going to be quite the clash. The Giants probably need a little bit more than Cleveland, but I'm sure Cleveland won't turn away a win. So Jeff, you want to throw out a quick prediction before we say goodbye?
We usually save these for the end of the week, but look, it's inexcusable. This is a team in the New York Giants that are 0-2. The Browns last year only lost one game at home. They've already lost one game at home this year. They have the Dolphins later in the year. They have the Chiefs later in the year. They certainly have all their division opponents. I don't think this is going to be the one. I don't think the Browns are where they're going to play like clean and efficient yet. So you're going to get one of those, field goal combination scores. But if you wanted to say 26-13, 26-14, something like that. But the Browns like to get ahead, and then they like to go ahead and play their nickel and dime and just, rotate in pass rushers. And that would be the ideal plan for them, of course.
All right. Well, I said that if the Giants didn't win the first two games, I would have a hard time picking them to win. I got to see better football. I saw a little bit of improvement, just a smidge, some bright spots here and there, particularly on offense. But until this team shows me they can play complementary football, until they show me that, they can stop the run, I don't know that I can pick them. So I'm going to get the edge here to the Cleveland Browns. I'm going to say 28-13.
0-3 is what you got to avoid. And the New York Giants hoping to avoid that against the Browns, and the Browns looking to go to 2-1. So for more on the Giants and the Browns, check out Patricia over at Locked On Giants and Jeff over at Locked On Browns, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That concludes the 1 p.m. slate, but don't go anywhere. We have a lot to dive into on the Ultimate NFL pregame show, including some incredible 4 o'clock window matchups, plus 3 primetime games, including 2 Monday nighters, all that and more next on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss the deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return on Prize Picks, your picks are still live. So for the Ravens and Cowboys game, let's go there. Maybe you want to pick more on CeeDee Lamb's receiving yards, maybe more on Zay Flowers and his receiving yards, 2 elite receiving weapons. They might be game for that over on Sunday. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. There are plenty of incredible matchups across the NFL in week number 3, including a bunch of 4 o'clock matchups, and that primetime window has its fair share of juicy ones as well. This is the Ultimate NFL pregame show. I am Kevin Ostreicher, bringing you the expert analysis across the Locked On Podcast Network from our hosts and experts, getting you ready for the games. And we're going to be diving into a lot of these 425 matchups as we get ready for them. And we have to start in Dallas. The Dallas Cowboys, coming off of an embarrassing effort against the New Orleans Saints in week number 2, will face off against the reeling Baltimore Ravens, who are a surprising 0-2 team. So the Ravens trying to avoid an 0-3 hole. The Cowboys looking to bounce back from their week 2 defeat. And so myself, Kevin Ostreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens, as well as Marcus Mosher, the host of Locked On Cowboys, will be taking you through all the biggest storylines, key questions, and more for the matchup.
This Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Kevin, let's talk about the 3 things the Ravens need to do to win this game. What are they?
First of all, get out to an early lead. I think, to me, with what this Ravens team has done over the first 2 weeks, it's been offensive inconsistency, which has been a little bit of an issue for them, where they'll either start fast, like we saw in week 1, they go up 5 carries to Derrick Henry, score, touchdown, or it's the other part of it where you start slow and then you find something and then it kind of falls off after that. So a consistent 60 minutes of football with a fast start on the offensive side of the ball, and obviously that does include protecting Lamar Jackson, opening up rushing lanes on the offensive line like we talked about earlier. The second thing is late game execution and just situational and game awareness in general. John Harbaugh's taken a lot of flack over these first 2 weeks, and a lot of it deserved for his game management. Obviously, in that Raiders game in week 2, challenged a pretty obvious Devontae Adams catch, lost them a timeout in the second half, and they needed that timeout in order to give the offense enough time to drive down the field to try to tie and win the game. They didn't have it. And so there's been a lot of that. The Ravens, in their fourth quarter leads, they've blown more fourth quarter leads in the last 5 years than any team. The Raiders hadn't won a game being down 10 plus points in the fourth quarter in 49 games, but the Raiders got that lucky number 50 against Baltimore. So if they're up in the fourth quarter, you have to be able to shut the door on this Dallas team. You can't let any momentum in, because we saw in that week 2 game, it was just time after time, play after play. You could see the momentum slipping away from the Ravens. And the final thing is, don't let CeeDee Lamb beat you. If he's able to play in this game, he's the guy that you have to be able to cover. He's the guy you have to be able to take out of the game plan. Now, that's much easier said than done. CeeDee's a heck of a player, and I still expect him to go and get his. But against the Raiders, it was, well, stop Devontae Adams, and Devontae had over 110 yards and a touchdown. So make a guy like Brandon Cooks beat you. Make a guy like Jalen Tolbert beat you. If Jalen Ferguson, if you got Jake Ferguson, if he's a guy that plays, make him stop. Make him be the guy that beats you. Or the run game, even that. But if CeeDee Lamb beats you, that's the guy that can and will eliminate the Cowboys' best player. And that, to me, at least gives you a shot, and you're okay with someone else being the guy that beats you at the end.
And then, Kevin, on the Cowboys side of things, they've got to find a way to get to 3rd and long. Last week, it's hard to believe, the Saints had 1 third down in the entire first half.
Wow.
1, and it was 3rd and short. Mike Zimmer is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league when he gets to 3rd and long, and he can design some of his exotic rushes. Now, he's not going to blitz a lot, but what he's going to do is show 6 or 7 blitzers, drop 3, and then send 4 in all these crazy directions. Last week, they weren't able to do any of that stuff because they never got the 3rd down. They never got the Saints into obvious passing situations. So whether that means run blitzing on early downs, however you can get the Lamar Jackson and the Ravens into some of these 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, you're going to have a chance to win on defense. On offense, I get the feeling, Kevin, that this is not going to be a game in which the Cowboys put up 450 yards, 500 yards. It's going to be you're going to get 3 red zone drives. You better convert on all 3 red zone drives into touchdowns. Last week, the Cowboys had to settle for too many field goals inside the 20-yard line because of sacks, fumbles, drop passes, miscommunications. You have to be more effective in the red zone. It's been a problem for the Cowboys early on this year. It was a problem for the Cowboys early on last year. So you are at home. Take advantage of those red zone opportunities. And the last thing, and this is probably the most important, one of the disturbing trends about this Cowboys team is when they get up in a game, they start to roll, right? Like they have all the confidence in the world. And that's why you see so many blowouts. And it's why you see this Cowboys team have one of the highest point differentials in the league each and every year. Baltimore's up there as well. But when things go poorly, they tend to let it snowball, right? The offense starts to press if the defense gives up back-to-back touchdowns. The defense starts to be over-aggressive, and that's when they get beat with plays down the field. The Baltimore Ravens are a good team. I know the record doesn't say that, but we know they're a good team. They're going to make some plays. They're going to score some points. Don't feel like the game is over if you give up 10 points in the first 20 minutes. Don't let things snowball. Try to keep this close and see if you can steal a game at home at the end.
Yeah, and that's going to be big for both teams. Is we could very well see this come down to the kicker matchup, and either one of those guys. I know Justin Tucker is 1 for 7 from 50 plus yards, and dating back to last season. But these are 2 of the best kickers in the NFL, and this could be a game that comes down to the wire. But it's going to be on both teams to not get caught up in the early game. Obviously, it's important to go up early, but I mean, this is football. This is the NFL. Anything can happen, and both these teams are talented, but obviously Dallas doesn't want to fall into a 1-2 hole. And of course, Baltimore, that 0-3 hole kind of feels like a, pretty big blow to your season if it comes to that.
Yeah. I would love to see this turn into a kicker battle. That'd be really fun. I believe I'm gonna have to double check the stats, but I believe Brandon Aubrey is 3 for 3 on kicks over 60 yards in his NFL career, which is pretty crazy. He actually against Cleveland, in Cleveland, hit a 66-yarder, but the Cowboys called timeout before he made the kick. Pretty incredible. I get the feeling, Kevin, that we're going to get one outrageously long kick in this game. What do you think?
Man, yeah, these to me are the two best kickers in the league. Yeah. I think we have to. A 60-plus yarder.
Oh, it's coming, right? Like
I think
halftime.
We might see one from each kicker. And I know Tucker's been struggling, and I know that the confidence in him for a lot of the fan base is down. Not me personally, but, just it's been tough. Maybe we see it. Maybe that's a bold prediction I'll throw out. 60-plus yard field goal for each kicker in this game.
There you go. I like the idea of one made field goal above 60 yards. I would like to see what kind of odds we can get from FanDuel on that.
If you want more Ravens coverage, you can go check me out over at Locked On Ravens. And if you want more Cowboys coverage, Marcus has it covered over at Locked On Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. San Francisco 49ers coming off a tough defeat to the Minnesota Vikings in week 2 are dealing with a ton of injuries, and they will travel to Los Angeles to take on the Rams, who are certainly dealing with their injuries themselves. Just an injury-riddled pair of teams here. And Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers, as well as Doug McCain of Locked On Rams, have everything you need to know about the latest on injuries and how that might affect the game.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams and Locked On 49ers. We got a crossover edition Thursday. Third segment, we're going to throw out some keys to victory. We're going to throw out some predictions. But as far as the wide receivers go, I mean, you're looking at a golden opportunity for someone to step up, get targets, make plays. Last year when Tutu Atwell, he really fell off. I mean, he got supplanted by Demarcus Robinson. He really stepped up as a red zone threat. He really built a lot of chemistry with Matthew Stafford. And he's one of the first guys I'm looking at to be that go-to guy for Stafford, along with Tyler Johnson.
So this is what's interesting to me. So we saw Tyler Johnson kind of jump into the Puka role. Demarcus Robinson's kind of always been his role, but I don't think Demarcus Robinson's role would change that much, even with Nakua and now Cooper Kupp out, because his role is kind of his role. What has me fascinated and really excited is the guy you mentioned, Jordan Whittington, because you look at how he's built. He's really good after the catch, that big power slot player. And if he slips in there and starts running the Cooper Kupp routes, that's what has me excited. That's what has me excited about my fantasy team and picking him up and being like, can this be a lightning in the ball situation like we saw? And I don't want to put it on and be like, oh, he's the next Puka Nakua. Like it's that easy. I don't think it's always going to be that easy. But if there's a team and a scheme and a quarterback and a coach that you could find a guy in the 6th round and be like, well, this guy's tough. He'll go over the middle. He'll make plays after the catch. He'll make those catches in traffic. And guess what? Cooper Kupp's hurt. So you're playing his position now, and you got those slot targets, which are some of the most valuable targets now in the NFL. I feel like the upside is a little bit higher with him, even though he's a rookie.
100%. I mean, this is a golden opportunity for him to, I'm not saying it's going to be this year's Puka Nakua, but if he has a couple of good games with them out, he can jump in front of the guys ahead of him on the depth chart. And it's really interesting when it comes to Jordan Whittington, because in the opener against the Lions, he played just 2 offensive snaps, but he would have scored a touchdown if it weren't for A.J.R. Curry's holding there where he's grabbing the face mask. And then you look in week 2, 26 snaps. He caught 2 passes, no gain, and then had another one for 22 yards. But he remained the starter for the last part of that game. I think that you look at that right there, you probably say, oh, he's probably not going to be a starter, right? You're probably going to look at guys like Demarcus Robinson as one of your starters, and then a combination of Whittington, Atwell, and Tyler Johnson. But I think when you consider the fact that he played the entire second half on Sunday after Kupp was injured, I think he's the guy that stepped up and is the starter. And yes, he is a 6th-round pick in just his 3rd game, but this guy just built different, man. He's got that, man, dude is straight up jacked. I mean, he's got the physicality. He just feels like the moment's not too big for him. And I almost think that he's saying, you know what? It's next man up mentality. I think he's built for this. I totally think he's going to be a big factor for the Rams, at least as far as just getting opportunities.
And Whittington was blocked a little bit and it was kind of a hidden gem at Texas. Yes. There was 2 guys that were 1st-round caliber dudes that were there with him as well. So I think he probably, if A.D. Mitchell doesn't transfer to Texas and stay at Georgia early in his career, Whittington maybe is the number 2 guy there. And does he get drafted in the 4th round instead, right? The 3rd round or something like that, because the tape is good, but he just kind of got lost a little bit. Jordan Mason was the same story, and the 49ers plucked him as an undrafted free agent. He got supplanted he was the starter early in his career at Georgia Tech. He got supplanted by the guy who ended up being number 12 pick in the draft in Jahmyr Gibbs. at Georgia Tech. Jahmyr Gibbs was the biggest prospect they ever got, the biggest recruit ever in that school's history. And then he transferred to Alabama, and we're like, oh yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs. That's why Jordan Mason didn't play that much. So I think there's some similarities there. Guys that were blocked on their college team that were a lot better might have got drafted higher.
And that we're highly touted recruits, right? Jordan Whittington was a 5-star recruit. Just goes to show. I mean, some of these guys like the Ohio State dudes, you know what I mean? The first couple of years, you're going to be behind that depth chart. Look at Marvin Harrison Jr. He's behind Njigba. He's behind Olave. He's behind all those dudes and Garrett Wilson at one point. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I'd rather go to the bigger program where I can learn and then less wear and tear. And now Jordan Whittington's in a perfect spot with a better organization that kind of has the ability to utilize him. But I want to ask you a couple questions too, as far as this offense without CMC, this offense without Debo. You saw Jordan in the first game. I think it was 28 carries. That was the most ever by a Shanahan-led team. I mean, what kind of challenge do you think this presents the Rams versus what they've seen in the past as far as how you use CMC last year and Debo? I mean, are you going to go run heavy? Are you going to see a little more on the outside? I mean, what do you expect from how the game plan is going to look from Shanahan?
Yeah, there was a surprisingly few amount of play action snaps last week in the Minnesota Vikings, and I don't know why that is, because the Shanahan, it's all about motion and play action. And so I think they're going to get back to that in this one. You're going to see more motion, more play action. And yeah, they're going to get that. Kyle Shanahan's such a genius in this way. And that's why I brought up the linebackers, because he does that thing where you have a running back, he's right next to the quarterback. And then he just shifts. He doesn't shift across the formation. He shifts 3 steps over. And all Kyle Shanahan wants is that angle. He just wants that linebacker to go, okay, I'm going to go this way with the running back. And then they've got that cut back angle that they want. And so that's why I'm fascinated with the linebacker matchup in this. And that's probably what Kyle Shanahan's looking to get after. So I have a feeling it's going to be a heavy run game again. And Kyle Shanahan loves his RB1s. Jordan Mason could never get on the field when Christian McCaffrey was healthy. And now that Christian McCaffrey's out, he won't take Jordan Mason off the field either. He's gotten every snap but one in the last 2 games running the football for the 49ers. So maybe you see a little rookie Isaac Guerrero in there, but I think it's going to be a heavy dose of Jordan Mason once again. And I'd be shocked if he has less than 20 carries in this game. And a little glimpse into the future with the 49ers passing game, because when you sign Brandon Ayuk, he's 2 years younger than Debo. His body was probably going to have less wear and tear than Debo's and last a little bit longer. So when you look ahead to this 49ers team in 2025, 2026 and beyond, that's why you signed Debo Samuel to be that number 1 of the future, even if he's not the number 1 option in the offense right now. Well, Christian McCaffrey's already hurt and Debo's out now. So we're going to kind of get a glimpse on what this future passing game is going to look like for the 49ers with a true outside number 1 wide receiver in Brandon Ayuk, with your young quarterback that might earn upwards of $50 to $60 million as a free agent. And so I'm fascinated to see what that looks like without Debo and Christian McCaffrey getting those automatic, we're game planning to get you touches early. Kyle Shanahan doesn't have that in this game.
Yeah, and that's where it's kind of one of those things, especially with guys out. Do you play the hot hand? I mean, do you play the hot matchup? And I think you were kind of going back to the Jordan Whittington thing. You're going to see him a ton in motion. I mean, that's how they're going to use him. I mean, week 1, they had 42 snaps with Cooper Kupp where he's in motion and 12 in week 1 as well. So it's like, I mean, this guy is constantly being utilized in the same fashion. I think the X factor for the Rams, though, it has to be Kyren Williams. Where has the 2023 version of Kyren Williams been? And a lot of that in week 1 was the fact that the offensive line was decimated by injuries. So you kind of had to go to more West Coast quick passing game to try to keep Stafford upright. But I mean, he just has been non-existent. I mean, last game, 12 carries, longest rush, 9 yards, caught 4 passes for 27 yards. But I mean, most of that came when it was garbage time anyway. So second straight week that Kyren Williams hasn't been that true impact running back that we saw last season. The first 2 games, 75 yards on 30 carries this season. So if you can get the Kyren Williams that we saw last year, that was one of the big reasons why the Rams went on their second half run. It's going to go a long way to see if you can just stay in this game. If you can just stay in this game and keep it interesting late and hopefully walk away with the win.
Yeah, and one thing with the Rams, and it's why I don't want to count the Rams out, not only in this game, but when you look at a season, let's say they go 0-3. And the reason they're not going to tank, the reason they're not going to end up with the number 1 pick in the draft or something like that, or even a top 5 pick, is because Sean McVay's too good and Matthew Stafford's too good. And when you have a great coach and quarterback, that is the thing that you want in the NFL. Now, they might have a lot less on top of that right now, and the defense might not be willing to allow them to do that. But guess what? So maybe some fireworks in this one. We've got the number 1 and number 2 passing yardage leaders in the NFL right now in Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford. So yeah, let's just let them sling it and have a little fun on Sunday.
Exactly. I mean, both teams kind of looking to get a get-right game in some capacity. Rams 0-2, Niners at 1-1. I mean, you lose to your former quarterback backup in Darnold. You had that crazy 97-yard touchdown with Justin Jefferson. I'm sure you haven't enjoyed watching that highlight all week. But, yeah, it's a great opportunity for this Rams team to say, okay, if you can get this win, then that early bye that you have in week 6 starts to feel a little better, and you start to change the entire outlook of your season. If you fall to 0-3, then things get really, really dicey for you at that point against an opponent that you've lost to. I think it's 8 out of 9 times in the regular season, which is pretty wild. But it's going to be a tough one. Any predictions, though? Do you throw out scores on the crossover episodes, Brian?
Usually we kind of wait for the final episode for the predictions, but I'll say that the spread, I don't like that the spread is over a touchdown. The half a point is getting me here. And, these are really familiar teams. And when you go on the road against a division opponent, it's hard to consistently blow those teams out. Even if I do like the 49ers in this one, if there's a way to bet on this, looking at the FanDuel odds, maybe you take the points with the Rams at 7.5, and you think they keep this within a touchdown. But the 49ers are going to be a little extra angry. Might have been a little tougher practices this week coming off a loss. I don't like that for the Rams that the 49ers lost last week, because you probably don't even get that, we're going to look past this team that's kind of decimated in injuries this week.
Yeah, it's tough to talk myself into a pick for sure. I mean, I'm still kind of reeling off the 0-2 start, but I still think that, yeah, there is an opportunity there for this Rams team against this 49ers. They're going to come up. They're going to be ready to play. It's the home opener. You're getting guys back. Like you say, you still have Stafford and Sean McVay. Also, I mean, look, this team, they just need a break. They need something good to happen for them. I was looking at doing a little prep for the show, saw the 49ers, second worst third down defense in the NFL. Well, guess what? Rams, one of the worst at converting, right? Just 7 of 23 attempts. So kind of my point is some things just kind of have to give in this game one way or the other. And hopefully you'll start to get that positive regression to the mean if you're the Rams. So you know what? I'm not afraid. I'll throw out a prediction. You know what? 0-2. They're going to go 1-3. They're going to be 1-2 after this season, after this game. I got the Rams winning. Give me the Rams 24-16. 24-16 in this one. You don't have to give your prediction, but what do you think about that score? What are your thoughts?
Oh man, I don't. The camera isn't catching what you're drinking down there before we recorded this podcast. But no, look, I was confident in the 49ers last week after seeing them on Monday Night Football, and they went on the road and they lost to Sam Darnold. And the Rams have a better quarterback than Sam Darnold, that's for sure, and a pretty darn good coach as the Vikings do as well. I do like the 49ers in this one, though, and I think the loss last week actually hurts the Rams' chances as well, because the 49ers are going to be ready to play. Getting Hufanga back is going to help their third down defense, hopefully, and maybe a little bit more pass rush against a beat-up offensive line, I think, is just the thing the 49ers need to get right after a big loss. So I do like the 49ers. I'd be surprised if the 49ers dropped the second one in a row.
Brian and Doug are great. For more on Brian, check him out over at Locked On 49ers. For Doug, check him out over at Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Miami Dolphins are going to move forward without Tua Tagovailoa after his scary injury on Thursday Night Football, and they'll be traveling to the West Coast to take on the Seattle Seahawks in Week 3, who were 2-0 under new head coach Mike Macdonald. So Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins and Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks get ready for the game and everything you need to know.
Welcome back to Crossover Thursday. I'm Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks. Glad to be teaming up with Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins here for our Week 3 crossover. Both these teams have had playoff appearances in recent years. Seattle just missed last year. Miami made it the last 2 years. Little more murky situation with the quarterback Tagovailoa going down with a third concussion in the last couple of seasons, but nonetheless, the Dolphins still have a lot of star power on the offensive side of the football, plenty of good players on defense as well. They're not going to be taking this game lightly, and they're going to be looking to get the upset. Kyle, looking at Miami's situation with Skylar Thompson being under center, some of the changes that they've had personnel-wise on defense as well, what do you think the Miami Dolphins have to accomplish in this game to be able to beat the Seahawks on the road after making that super long trip cross country?
So I'll stay away from low-hanging fruit like win the turnover battle with Skylar Thompson playing at quarterback, right? But I think the red zone has been a big issue for the Dolphins on both ends of the field throughout the first two games. Miami is 2 of 6 on offensive possessions in the red zone, converting for touchdowns, and they have allowed 4 touchdowns on 5 defensive trips into the red zone. That is not sustainable for any level of success, regardless of who's playing quarterback. So when things get tight and you have to make decisions faster, what are your answers in this game, especially in against a defense that are you going to see more simulated pressures where you think you're having space to access based on pressure, but guys are actually dropping out into those areas of the field and you have to make those snap decisions? How do you choose to navigate giving your offense answers and execute it at a level that's going to allow you to get the ball into the end zone? This is not a game that you can settle for 3 points a couple of times because, as you mentioned earlier in the crossover, Geno Smith's playing really high-level football right now, and they have weapons. This is a team that, if they have to and be aggressive, they're probably going to like their matchups. And the Ryan Grubb offense, they're spreading the field and forcing you to cover every inch of it, too. You know, there's a vertical element to this, but this is a pretty well-balanced based off of what I have seen passing attack as far as where they can attack you. So you need to be able to do your part. And then when Seattle gets down in there, your veteran players that you brought in, Jordan Brooks for his coverage in the middle of the field. Jalen Ramsey was better in week 2 than he was in week 1 after he didn't practice for a couple of weeks. Calais Campbell up front alongside Zach Sealer. Calais Campbell replacing Christian Wilkins. Jalen Phillips getting matchups. Your leaders on that side of the ball, you have to win that exchange with those possessions because Miami's probably going to play a little bit more of a possession-oriented game with trying to possess the ball, shorten the possessions for both sides, and hope that you can make the situational plays to win the game.
It's interesting because I think the Seahawks are going to try to play a little bit of possessional football in this game too, even with the quarterback situation for Miami. How do you limit Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and A-Chain and all those explosive weapons? You keep them off the field. And as I mentioned earlier, it feels like this is a game that the Seahawks, one of the things they have got to get going, that run game was weak last week in New England. They really struggled to get it going until late in the game. They got a couple of decent runs from Zach Charbonnet, but they got to be able to get the blocking up front so that Charbonnet can get rolling downhill. He is not quite as explosive as Ken Walker III. Mm-hmm. It takes him a little longer to get up to speed. Can they get that run game going? And if they are able to do that, I think that the matchups are there. Even Jalen Ramsey, I mean, DK Metcalf and Jalen Ramsey have had some epic matchups over the years when Ramsey was playing in LA. And the last couple of times that these two played against each other, Metcalf actually won that matchup. When you look at the numbers, he had a game-winning touchdown in one of those games against Ramsey as well. So Geno Smith is not going to be afraid to target Jalen Ramsey with DK Metcalf. But I look at the other matchups, Kendall Fuller going up against Tyler Lockett or Jackson Smith and Jigba, who can play inside and out. I like the other matchups there if Geno Smith has time to throw. It feels like getting your run game going, at least having a complementary run game is going to be able to take some of that pressure. Don't let Jalen Phillips and some of those guys be able to really pin their ears back. So I'm looking offensively at this game, the run game, particularly between the tackles where they struggled last week. Can he get it going against Miami's front seven? If they can do that, I think there's going to be a ripple effect. They've got some matchups they can take advantage of. And on defense, I think you do need to open up things a little bit as far as what kind of looks that you're going to be bringing in. And I'm even going to go as far as saying this is a game where Seattle may takes a few more risks with the blitz because you're going up against an inexperienced quarterback. Even though he is more athletic than Tagovailoa, Thompson is a player that feels like with that lack of experience, looking back at some of the preseason tape, if you can get some quick pressure on him, he can be forced into some bad decisions, even with some of the weapons they got on the outside. Make the young, inexperienced quarterback have to beat you in those situations. So mix in more blitzes, some sim pressures, maybe not open up the entire toolbox, but get some of those extra plays we haven't seen to this point and mix looks up a little bit, send some pressure from different levels of the defense, try to confuse the quarterback. I think if they can check off those boxes, the Seahawks have a really good chance to win this football game. As far as odds going into this game? The Seahawks are a 4.5-point favorite right now. Kyle, you and I both are going to dish out our game predictions as far as scores on our Friday episodes. But with that 4.5 odds being a favorite for the Seahawks, how do you think the Dolphins handle this football game in terms of that? Are they going to be able to cover that, or is this going to be a game that with the quarterback situations could be difficult for them to be able to keep this game within 4.5 points?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is this was not an offense that traveled particularly well last year with your starting quarterback on the field. And some of that's based off the timing of the offense with the timing of the motions and everybody being able to communicate as far as what the calls are and when the ball snapped with the motion, or is it out of sync? So it could go both ways, right? Where that in a very difficult place to play rears its head, or maybe it's simpler because you have to have the backup quarterback in, so you can't do as much. And maybe it gives the offense a chance to do some more simple things. If I were a betting man, and I'm not, but if I were, I would probably like Seattle with the 4.5 points at home, just because I don't know how well this offense travels in general. And then there's the layer of the quarterback change on top of it.
If you want great Dolphins and Seahawks coverage, be sure to check out Kyle over on Locked On Dolphins and Corbin over on Locked On Seahawks as they get ready for a potentially intriguing matchup over there out west, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Still a lot to talk about here on the Ultimate NFL pregame show as we will wrap up the rest of the 4 o'clock window games. A couple of West Coast games out there, the Cardinals hosting as well as the Raiders hosting, so stay tuned, a lot to get to on the show. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. And again, you heard us talk about FanDuel a lot here on the Locked On Podcast Network and the Ultimate NFL pregame show. It's America's #1 sports book. And FanDuel has so many different things, so many different ways that you can get involved. And I love just seeing everything they have on the docket. And we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial if anyone will send a ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is that Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel any time. So when you're talking about the Sunday night matchup, the Chiefs, the Falcons, the Chiefs open up as 3-point favorites in that game. So if you like that line one way or the other, head over to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. We return here on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. Kevin Ostreicher still here with you, getting you ready for all of Sunday and Monday's NFL action. Really exciting week 3 on the docket. Let's round out the 4 o'clock window game, starting off with the Arizona Cardinals, who will be hosting the Detroit Lions. The Lions trying to come back from a tough week 2 defeat. In the Cardinals, Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. certainly got on the same page last week. They'll hope to continue that trend in week 3. Matt Derry of Locked On Lions, Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals are here for you, answering the biggest questions of the game.
I'm like 65% terrified and 35% confident.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it should be flipped for the Lions. I think that's about right. Where
I'm lower. I'm at 55-45. I've told you this game has scared me from the minute the schedule came out. I was like, why are you? I said when we did, you did do the schedule game on the show, and I said I'm counting this as a loss. Now I didn't have them losing to Tampa at home, but I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't. I think this is dangerous. I think going out west is tough. I just like how Gannon coaches. I think you guys are in every game like you were last year, and Kyler to me could be the difference maker, and maybe a Prater 55-yarder or something, which we've seen in Detroit, could decide this game. This is not going to be an easy game for the Lions.
So what are the paths to victory for you for the Lions? Like, what are the keys to victory here?
Well, they got to get back to running the ball. 55 pass attempts last Sunday is unacceptable, and I think they will. Pounding David Montgomery, and that could be the thing. The Lions' offensive line could just manhandle the Cardinals' front, and Montgomery could get 20 carries and get 100 yards, and Gibbs could get 17 carries and get 90 yards. It could be that type of day. When the Lions were so successful last year, go back to the Green Bay game in Green Bay and some others, they just pounded people with that ground game, and that was Dan Campbell football. So if they get back to that, certainly containing Murray, I just think, Hutchinson's going to get in there. Kelvin Beachum as a backup right tackle is a solid vet, but he's not Williams. So if Hutch can get there, he's got to finish. There's got to be taking Kyler to the ground, or at least a pressure in a hurry that forces a throw out of bounds, as opposed to a Murray 12 to 15 yard scramble. Alex Anzalone is going to be a question mark for this game. He's been their best linebacker the last 2 years. And if he doesn't play, that's a guy that can run down Kyler Murray. Not if they raced, Murray would beat him, but you know what I mean? So I think those are two real big keys that the Lions, if they want to win, have got to kind of shore up a little bit.
Yeah, if you can't protect Kyler Murray, none of this is going to work. It's what I've said since 2019 when he got drafted. That's never more prevalent than on Sunday, where this is a true test for this, offensive line that's been moved around. Paris Johnson Jr. looked good last week. Evan Brown, left guard, he was the highest rated, I believe. He was the highest rated, Pro Football Focus rated offensive lineman for the Cardinals. Left guard was the biggest hole void that the Cardinals had last year. Yalta Froholt is a fringe Pro Bowler at center, coming out of nowhere, got a contract extension before the season started. And then Will Hernandez and Kelvin Beachum on the right are going to have their plates full with Aiden Hutchinson, et cetera. I do see the Cardinals running a little bit more shotgun just because, it gives Kyler Murray an extra second before Aiden Hutchinson's in his face. I think they're going to run the ball, and they're going to try and establish the run like they always do. This is a run-first team, which could, render Aiden Hutchinson a little bit more obsolete than if they were throwing the ball 35 times. And for the Cardinals defensively, the player that scares me the most is Jahmyr Gibbs, because he's the one that can break a 75-yarder, whether it be a swing pass, screen pass, whether he's running, wheel route, or he's just running a streak down the sidelines. He's the one. The biggest thing for me, it's not even Amon-Ra St. Brown that's going to eat him. He's going to have 15 catches for 150 yards in it. Like, it's one of those things that Cooper Kupp I expected to have last week. The big plays are the things that'll kill the Cardinals because the defense can't afford to do it. They can't afford Jamison Williams running a go route and just burning, bracketed coverage, which I'm sure that he'll see from time to time from whatever corner and whatever safety, whatever side of the field he's on. The big plays for Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams are the ones that terrify me the most. And I think that, listen, man, if I have to opt between passing and defending the run, I'm just hoping that the Cardinals can sustain under 5 yards a carry and have them run the ball a lot. I'd invite that more than Jared Goff throwing 40-plus times against his defense.
Yeah, I mean, Lions have a lot of talent. They do. And I love the fact that they want to win up front, and they have for the most part. Like I said, especially with the D-line being so improved. Now you're going to get, Liam McNeil freed up a little bit now that DJ Reader has a game under his belt alongside Hutchinson. And if Davenport's healthy, that's a pretty good mix up front. And again, I think Murray just finds a way to escape, which is a little bit scary no matter what defense they're putting out there. Be interesting to see how the kicking game goes. This will be a test for the rookie Jake Bates, his first road game, kicking out there. And I kind of see this as, Vegas had it and our friends at FanDuel had it about 51.5, 52 for over under. They think it's going to be a high scoring ish game. I could see the Lions squeaking by, but I do not think this is going to be an easy one at all.
No, and I agree. And the confidence, or kind of wavering confidence in your voice for the last 26 minutes and 24 seconds. You've been listen, we're serial. It's not if, then it's not if, it's when things kind of fall by the wayside. This is a different chapter in both of these, organizations' careers organizations, just history that neither of us really saw happening. We talk about this, that, if you would have told me 10 years ago that, the Cardinals would be here, that the Lions would be where they are, you'd be like, what drug test you? Kind of thing. Yeah. So it's just going to be interesting to see, the one thing that I think the Cardinals may have a leg up on, which is very, very much a work in progress, is I don't see the Lions having a killer instinct. I don't see we're going to step on your proverbial neck team and just take what's ours. The NFC is wide open. The NFC hasn't been this wide open in quite some time, especially with the injuries in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a team that comes out of the woodwork that has that killer instinct that can just go get a win, ugly, pretty, whatever.
I'll say this. The Lions aren't cocky, though. If you want the one thing that I've really liked about this franchise and organization led by Dan Campbell this entire summer and spring was we're not going to come out and think just because Sports Illustrated says we're a Super Bowl team. Sure. We were 30 minutes away from it last year and gagged it in San Francisco. Oh, we're just going to come out. They've been very grounded. They have said, hey, we're focused on the Rams. And last week, All right, we're 1-0, but we're focused on Tampa Bay. Now it's all right, we got to go on the road. What can be that step on their neck moment this week could be big drive up 3, 4 minutes to go, and it's just Montgomery down your throat, and they take a knee and they win by 3. That could be a watch this. We're just going to pound it. You're not going to stop it. They did that a couple times last year, and they can do it again. That could be that, as opposed to what you're right. What you're saying is a team like Minnesota now feels like they have a chance off to a 2-0 start because the rest of that conference is kind of up for grabs. I see what you're saying.
And kids, don't step on people's necks. We're talking in hypotheticals, and we're talking in metaphors.
We'll see how it all unfolds for those two NFC foes. For more on Matt, more on Alex, check them out over at Locked On Lions and Locked On Cardinals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The last of the 4:00 window games, the Carolina Panthers, after benching Bryce Young, will be traveling to Las Vegas to take on those Las Vegas Raiders, who came out with an impressive win over the Baltimore Ravens in Week 2. So Julian Council of Locked On Panthers and your boy Q of Locked On Raiders give you all the insight you need to know as we figure out which team could take home the win on Sunday.
Back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Raiders, it's a Locked On NFL crossover Thursday presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. The Raiders 1-1 to start off the season. The Panthers 0-2. They have a common opponent. The Chargers, Week 1, were able to run on the Raiders in the second half, but it was a close game there in that divisional matchup. At halftime, the Panthers, well, they weren't really in the game at any point once they kicked it off. They had an opening kickoff face mask penalty, and Felipe Franks on the Panthers was like dancing on a clear face mask. So I knew right then and there this team was cooked. So we'll see if they're still cooked now that Andy Dalton is going to be the starting quarterback, but they got to do some things, Q. A lot of things, not just 3 things, but a lot of things. They're going to turn things around moving forward, but starting out on Sunday on the road against the Raiders. And I guess, God, trying to find 3 things to pin down, convert on third down. They are 2 for 22 through 2 weeks. It's embarrassing. And it's not like all these have been like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. They've been in some 3rd and long situations. But I look back at last week, had a couple of 3rd and 2s and could not converted 1 out of those 4, which is just embarrassing that they were even in that situation. Another thing I think you got to really be able to do is try to stretch the field vertically. If teams understand that you want to run the football, which Dave Canales stopped, but he wanted to be stubborn about running the ball. So far, the 2 backs, Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard, have carried the ball 28 times. That does not sound to me as if they're being stubborn at running the football. But if you want to be able to run the football, but you also want to be able to stretch the field, try and get the defense to come up a little bit more. Get some play action going on, get down the field, use a guy like Xavier Legette, who did not get a single target last week, your first-round pick out of South Carolina. Deontay Johnson, maybe try to find him down the field. Even Adam Thielen was wide open down the field last week in that game against the Chargers, and Bryce Young completely missed them. Got to be able to do that this week if they want to find a way to make some defenses honest, especially defense like Las Vegas. That is pretty stout up front. You can't be trying to just run the ball on them all day. Got to be able to throw the ball vertically. And then defensively, I mean, guys, this is one of the worst run teams in the NFL through 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. You can't be their get-right game. So for the love of God, show some pride, toughen up, stop somebody. Derek Brown, he's not coming back. Shy Tuttle, even if he's out there, he's a liability. You need guys like Jaden Peavy to step up. LeBron Ray's got to step up. Some young guys, Nick Thurman as well. A'Shawn Robinson's been fine so far this season, but he's also been a part of 2 like really bad rushing defensive performances so far this season. So got to find a way to stop the run. If you can't stop the run, like J.C. Horn said, you can't stop anything in this league.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And, you know, the Raiders definitely don't want the Panthers to be able to use the Raiders as their get-right game either. Right? I mean, you know, the funny thing is, like, people are talking about the Raiders now because they beat Baltimore, because nobody expected them to beat Baltimore. And so now one of the conversations is like, okay, well, now you don't want to be the team that most people don't believe the Panthers are going to win. And then all of a sudden they go in and be that. AP said it on Wednesday. He said, you know, we don't want to be on the wrong end of that conversation this upcoming week, right? We want to make sure that we're focused. And, you know, he said, how do we play after having success? How do we come back after having success? Do you, like I mentioned earlier, do you play at your level of your expectations, or do you play down to your competition? Do you ride a roller coaster? And he said, we don't want anything to do with the roller coaster. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially offensively. I'm interested to see how the Panthers attack the Raiders, and especially with Andy Dalton, who's a wily veteran, and he's not obviously going to be able to see the field better than Bryce Young, and just understand what he's seeing and be able to just to execute it a lot quicker. The processing should be quicker with Andy Dalton, a long time vet. When you look at the Raiders, man, I mean, just one of the things that they have to do in this game, and I've said it for the first 2 weeks, and they haven't done it. You mentioned it. They've got to run the ball. They have to run the ball, man. They've got to run the ball. They cannot keep thinking that they're going to get away with not doing that and think they're going to win games. So I don't know how they're going to have to open that up. Like I said before, if you have to throw first and then get to the run game, but somehow you've got to have the run game established for multiple reasons. Like you mentioned, play action pass. If you can't run the ball, nobody cares about that you're doing play action, because they know that, well, you can't run, so it doesn't matter, right? So they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to respect it. So you have to be able to run the rock. That is so important. It's something Antonio Pierce said way back in training camp. We want to be a smash mouth team. We want to run downhill, and we want to be able to throw the ball around the yard when we want to, because we've already battered and bruised them with the run game. So they've got the running backs to do it. Can they go out there and execute it? That's going to be the question. So that's obviously number one. First and foremost, they've got to be able to run the rock. Number two, they've got to protect the ball, right? There was a bad interception that Gardner Minshew threw against the Baltimore Ravens, and on his way off the field, Max Crosby grabbed him and was like, hey, man, we need you to be you. We need Washington State Gardner Minshew. We need you to snap back into it and be the guy. Like, we got your back, but you need to be the guy. And then he turned around and had a good second half of the game, but he's got to protect the ball. He really does. I mean, the worst thing that you could do for a team that's struggling offensively is give them a short field, right? I mean, that's the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Turn the ball over, give them a short field, and then all of a sudden Andy Dalton's out there on the 40. Oh, all I got to do is go half the length of the field. Boom, good, straight, right? And that can happen. I don't care how good your defense is. You're going to give up some yards. You're going to give up some big plays here and there. So you've got to be able to protect the ball, stay very, stout and hold on to a ball and really honestly have a few drives. The Raiders are averaging about 60 plays offensively per game, right? They really want to get that closer to 70. Make those drives a little bit longer, have a few more plays, have the time of possession be a little bit more lopsided where it's more in your favor than as opposed to like 50-50 like the first two games have been. I mean, again, they had 60 plays against Baltimore, 59 plays against the Chargers. So, I mean, I'm not a genius, but you could tell they're around 60 plays a game, right? That's what they're averaging. So,
Yeah.
And then defensively, I just think that they have to continue to do what they do. They just have to trust who they are, right? And creating turnovers is great. I'd love to see them create a couple more turnovers. They finally picked off a pass last week against Lamar. They do look for turnovers, but as long as they're out there playing the stout defense that they've been playing, have done a really good job of stopping the run until late in games when it's all of a sudden, like I said, they've been out there on the field too long. Then teams start to get off a little bit. So I think as long as they're able to do that, you mentioned that the Panthers struggle on third down. In that case, get off the field on third down. Right? Get off the field on third down. If they're already struggling to convert third downs, then make sure you handle your business. Pin your ears back. Do what you got to do. Understand that that's a weakness right now and exploit that weakness. So I'm sure that they're studying that on film, but I have a lot of faith in the defense. I really do. The offense is always going to be a question until it's not, but the defense to me is the strength of the team. So as long as they go out there and play the defense the way that they know how, led by Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, I think they'll be fine. But they can't say, oh, this is the Panthers, the 0-2 Panthers coming in. And I laugh when I say that because, man, look, they lost to Baker Mayfield and the Rams 48 hours after Baker Mayfield signed with the team, right?
Oh,
they lost
that Thursday night.
Yeah, they lost to Tyson Bagent and the Bears last season, right? Tyson Bagent's like a D3 quarterback, and he carved them up and made them look silly. They lost to Jeff Saturday when he came out the ESPN booth and was the head coach. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, so.
Oh, no, I didn't realize it was that bad. Oh, my God.
It's not a Panthers thing. Like, I want to make it clear to anyone listening and watching that I'm not disrespecting the Panthers. I just know the Raiders' tendencies that they have played down to their opponents, and that has to change. And that has to change on Sunday. They cannot do that and say, oh, this team's already had a quarterback change, and this team struggles on third down, and this team can't do this, that, and the third. They can't play like that. They've got to play like they did against Baltimore. They got to play like they did against Kansas City last year when they went in there on Christmas and beat them. That's who they have to be. They can't be this up and down roller coaster team. So, and believe me, I got more of those stories where they came from.
Yes. They lost to Jeff Saturday, who came out of it. And they lost, and then the Colts lost every game from then. I mean,
Yes.
And
yes.
It's funny. You bring up Tyson Bagent. I had some guy because getting some wild DMs this week about what the Panthers are going to do at quarterback moving forward. Someone asked me, "Hey, should the Panthers go after Tyson Bagent? It looks like he could be somebody." It's like, come on, man, come on.
No, he's not.
Guys, if the Bears thought he was somebody, they would not have got Caleb Williams.
Right.
Which that's crazy to pass up, anyways. But come on, y'all. Let's not be like this. All right, so I know it's Sin City. You got to wait to go out there and bet on it. FanDuel, that's our partners over there. 5.5 is what they have right now. Raiders 5.5 point favorite. Panthers, of course, 5.5 point underdog. If you look at the last couple of weeks, the line's been pretty similar. So to you Raider fans out there, maybe you want to get that alt line because I don't think you make that much money with that minus 5.5. If you go out there and do maybe minus 19.5. Might be able to make some coin. And there's a couple of sports books out there too, Panther fans, that y'all might want to go hit up too. Of course, use FanDuel, but if you want to make money everywhere, I'm just letting you know. Just trying to help you. Just trying to help you fund your trip, just in case things go awry for a third Sunday in a row. So yeah, man, we'll see. I'm a little concerned. I've gotten used to watching bad football, mainly just from like the home team, the Panthers. Right. I have not really had to watch a lot of rock fights, and that would be a departure from what I'm typically used to watching, at least from the opponent. So I'm concerned that might be what we see. Maybe a little bit excited about it, but it's going to be an interesting one on Sunday in Las Vegas for sure.
Yeah, it could be. It could turn into a rock fight. I think that, the Raiders are going to try to do everything that they can to build off of what they did in the fourth quarter against Baltimore. And, I think they found something, obviously, with Devontae and Brock Bowers, and that's really the key, man. Look at those two dudes, and I think that you'll see a lot from them. And, they got a guy in Trey Tucker that can stretch the field, so they haven't really done that yet this year. But I think that you're going to see a little bit better of an offense, but until we see it, I just can't say, I guarantee this is what's going to happen. I know Devontae is going to get fed. I know Brock Bowers is going to get fed. Everything else is kind of on the table, so we'll see what it looks like. But they're trying to find their offense. So if there's a silver lining for Panther fans where, hey, maybe there's a something there that we can exploit, that it could be that right there, that the Raiders are still trying to find their identity offensively.
Julian and Q providing great insight, and for more on Julian, more on Q, check them both out over on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Raiders, respectively. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That does it for the 4:00 window, but that does not mean we are done here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Coming up, we'll talk about the primetime battles, 1 Sunday night game and 2 Monday night bouts. All that and more next year on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So if we talk about that Chiefs and Falcons game, maybe Rashee Rice, you like him, you want to pick more on his receiving yards, maybe Patrick Mahomes, more on his passing yards. You can do all that over on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We return here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you. We talked about the 1 p.m. games, talked about the 4 o'clock games. We're now talking prime time. And first up is a battle between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Atlanta Falcons. Kansas City traveling to Atlanta. Kirk Cousins put on a show in that final drive for him in that Monday night game against Philadelphia. They'll look to continue that momentum, while the Kansas City Chiefs pulled out a squeaker against the Cincinnati Bengals and stayed undefeated. So, Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, take you through what you need to know ahead of Sunday Night Football.
Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons here, joined by Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, and it is Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Chris, let's talk about these keys to victory for each one of these teams. What are sort of the 3 things that you need to see from the Kansas City Chiefs in order for them to walk away with a victory?
So the big thing for me, and I will say I'm probably going to continue to have this until the Chiefs actually do something about it and end up on the right side of it, but it's win the turnover battle. go watch the game against the Bengals. They had 3 turnovers versus the Bengals 1 turnover. They could have had 4 if you look at the penalty they got, or the one they got called back on penalty. You have to take care of the ball better, and the only way to beat teams, regardless of how good they are, and there's questions whether or not Cincinnati was a good team going into that game last week. But the big thing is if you give up the ball 3 times and you give up your possessions, you're not going to generally win games. You cannot continually do that and beat the good teams or even mediocre teams, I don't think, on a regular basis. So to me, the first one is win the turnover battle, keep control of the ball, and I think you'll be in good shape.
Okay. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's pressuring Patrick Mahomes is one big key. As I mentioned with the stats, that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes become a little bit more human when you can get him on the ground. And again, I think you got to take advantage of that one weakness at the left tackle position that several teams so far have been able to exploit, and the Falcons have to find a way to exploit it even further. And that's going to lead to, potentially a big day for Matthew Dijon. And this is potentially the game that they're going to need him to show why they traded for him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I look at, my second key to victory for Kansas City, it's, just do your job. And that goes back to what you were just talking about, the left tackle doing his job, keeping Judon at bay. But it also comes down to catching the ball when the ball is thrown to you, and Mahomes making good decisions. And it also goes back to not making penalties. If you can do those things, just doing your job, I think you have a great chance of walking out of this game with a victory because, if they play basic fundamental football and are successful on a regular basis, then I think that they're going to score points, and it should be a game that they should be able to win.
Well, when you're talking about doing your job, my second key is someone do the job of blocking Chris Jones. If you can do that, good luck. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that being my job. I just get to talk about it on the podcast. But good luck to whoever is tasked with that. As you mentioned earlier in today's episode, Chris Jones lines up in a number of places. We'll probably see him going up against Falcons right tackle Caleb McGarry. We'll probably see him going up against both guards, Chris Lindstrom and Matthew Bergeron, and maybe they'll even have him go up against Jake Matthews, as you mentioned. Several of those guys tend to be a little bit more vulnerable to power than other guys, and so that's really where Chris Jones makes his hay as a pass rusher, where he can just use that length and that size and that physicality and just, walk you back into the quarterback. And that could be really problematic with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who isn't necessarily the most mobile quarterback at this stage, will not be doing all the Patrick Mahomes magic outside the pocket that we've seen on a regular basis there. So it's going to be really important to keep Chris Jones at bay however you can, whether that's chips, whether that's doubles, whether that's keeping, 2 running backs in the backfield, Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, to kind of help out there. So the Falcons have to figure out some way to keep that top pass rusher at bay, something that they did not do in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers and TJ Watt.
Yeah, you make a great point about Chris Jones with his power, but I will say this. The one thing that you continuously see from time to time is people try to be ready for that power and they overset themselves, and he takes advantage of it and uses speed to get around him and pushes their hands down. So that's something that they got to watch out for as well. The other big key to victory for me, if you're Kansas City, is you have to make it a one-dimensional game on the Atlanta side. Take away the run. Bring up a safety into the box, slow down the Atlanta running game. And one of the biggest reasons why that is such a big key in this game is because you're in a situation where the Chiefs have consistently had struggles late in the game with, especially against the Baltimore Ravens, where conditioning looked like it was a little bit of an issue, and you're not going to have a ton of guys that are going to be up and able to help you on a regular basis. So to me, it's make this a one-dimensional offense, stop the running game, and then make Kirk beat you with his decision-making and his throws. If you can do that, I think you have to feel pretty good because I think the Chiefs secondary can be ready for it.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to not only that first dimension for the Falcons offense, running the football, I think the last key for me is that second dimension, which is get Kyle Pitts going. It would be nice to see Kyle Pitts having a big game on a national spotlight so that the narrative about, him being overrated or him being a bust and all these various things that seem to surround Kyle Pitts, who is a heck of a football player, but just hasn't necessarily put out the production. And as we've mentioned already on today's episode, the Kansas City Chiefs have struggled in the first 2 games covering tight ends. As Chris mentioned, Isaiah Likely and Mike Gesicki are good tight ends.
I don't think either one of those guys is on the level of an athlete like Kyle Pitts. So it will be nice to see Zach Robinson being able to feature Kyle Pitts and attack that vulnerability in the Kansas City defense and get Kyle Pitts going. And that's going to create opportunities for some of the other weapons outside. And especially if you can couple that with the ground game spearheaded by Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, that is going to give you a complete offense that will allow you to at least try to keep pace with this Kansas City offense should Patrick Mahomes do Patrick Mahomes things as he so often does in, a dome stadium. So, the environment's going to be conducive for him to do Patrick Mahomes things. So, it's going to be an exciting game regardless of what the result is going to be. But Chris, we'll leave out on sort of what's your final prediction for this Sunday night matchup between the Falcons and Chiefs?
I think the last time I can remember them playing in Atlanta, Mahomes had a 75-yard pass to Tyreek Hill. I'd like to see something like that again to Xavier Worthy. Don't know that we'll see it in this game, but that was a fun I think it was a preseason game, but it was a lot of fun. When I look at this, it's a question of can Kansas City put up the points on the board, and I think that they can. I think that you look at what Mahomes and the Chiefs were able to do. The offense only scored, 19 points on the Bengals. 20 points because they went for 2 and they didn't get it. So that's not horrible of an offensive output. 27 points the first week against the Ravens. So I feel like they're going to be able to score points. The question is, are the Falcons going to be able to keep up? I think Kansas City's defense is playing not necessarily where they were last year, but I think they're playing well enough to slow the Falcons offense down. I'm going to go, 27-20 Kansas City.
Yeah, I think that's about where I'm at. As I mentioned earlier, I think Steve Spagnuolo has a history of keeping the lids on, whether it's Kyle Shanahan, whether it's Sean McVay, whether it's Zach Taylor, Kevin O'Connell, et cetera. And so I'm not expecting Zach Robinson to be the exception as opposed to the rule. So that feels like the Falcons are probably going to score around 20 points. I don't know if that's enough against this Chiefs offense, who feels like a pretty comfortable that they're going to score around 24 points. I think because of some of the issues that we've discussed on today's Crossover Thursday, I don't expect the Chiefs to put up monster points like that we have seen this offense do before, but I'm expecting this to be a 24-20 Chiefs win. I think a very competitive game. I think it will come down to the wire in those final minutes. And unfortunately, it might be decided on who has the ball last, as we saw last week against Kirk Cousins against the Eagles. The Falcons have the ball last, good things happen. But of course, the Chiefs know that they got 7+ years of that other guy having the ball last, and he tends to find ways to get the wins. And so I do expect that to be the case. So Falcons maybe potentially fall 1-2. Chiefs continue their undefeated streak.
Aaron and Chris, great insight there. I think this game, honestly, underrated to be the game of the week. I think this one could be really, really good. For more on Chris, more on Aaron, check them out over at Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's move to the Monday night. 2 games on Monday night, the first of which is the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Buffalo Bills. So Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills have everything from big matchups, key concerns, and more as these 2 teams are set to face off against one another.
Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills. Tony Wiggins, host of Locked On Jaguars. It's time to talk about the most important thing or things for each team to do to win this football game. Tony, 0-2 Jags coming into Orchard Park. What's on the top of the list? What are those top 3 things that have to be true for Jacksonville to come in and give the Bills their first loss of the season?
All right, the first thing is mental. The first thing is you got to leave the stink of last week. Don't get on a plane with it. And that's probably easier said than done because you can be motivated by it, but even sometimes that is bad because now you're pressing and you're trying too hard. So this is a new game. You have to treat it like a corner that just got beat for a touchdown. Next play, next game, start all over. And functionally in the football game, I think some of the things that they have to do is make sure that when they're on the field defensively, obviously contain Josh Allen in the pocket. Do not let him on 3rd and 5, scramble for 6 yards. You have to get them off the field on 3rd down. And then when you're on offense and you're Jacksonville, obviously the goal is to make sure you convert 3rd downs. And I think they'll have some success at doing that. I really believe they have to score touchdowns when they cross the 50-yard line. They have to finish drives with touchdowns. And one of the ways that they can do that is maybe go with some max protect and try to hit Brian Thomas Jr. deep. He is a real good football player. He is fabulous. I think he is a future superstar. He should be the guy that Trevor Lawrence goes and tells ownership, look, whatever you got to do for the next 10 years, that's my dude, because he has been outstanding. He's been open a lot more than his statistics will suggest. But I think they have to learn who to lead with. You can't just use your depth and keep running all of these different combinations. No, when you're struggling, you have to look at your best players, the dudes that you gave all of this money to, the dudes that you invested all of these resources in. On offense, it has to be Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Brian Thomas Jr. And I don't care if you have to go to them until Buffalo stops them. You continue to do it. You put pressure on them by using your best players, even if you have to dial something up. And you can't keep going with this, well, we got all of these weapons and all of these people rotating in and out. No. Go with your best players until you find an identity and win the game. But when they cross the 50-yard line, they have to get touchdowns, because if they don't, I think they're going to end up losing yet another close game on the road.
Tony, it's interesting that you talk about the best players, the identity, and you bring up Brian Thomas Jr., you bring up Travis Etienne, who I expected you to say. But as I've thought a lot about Jacksonville and what team they were going to be this year, I was mindful of some of the new pieces that they have on the offense, but I kept on saying to myself, well, they got Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. Well, Evan Ingram, obviously, the pre-game injury kept him out last week, but Christian Kirk, 2 catches in 2 games. Like, what's happening there?
Drops against Miami. And that's what I talk about extending possessions. He had a drop on 3rd down. If they keep that, Miami probably doesn't win. Travis Etienne fumbled too. They don't win if Travis Etienne just walks into the end zone and makes it 24-7. But you think back, we only think about plays that are missed at the end of games. There are plays at the beginning of games too, on 3rd down, that if you convert them, it causes the game to go in a totally different direction. Yeah. And then just last week, Denzel Ward knows they weren't letting him get open. Last week, Christian Kirk, he might as well not even have been out there, because it was tough sledding for everyone, because Trevor was running for his life again. But the couple of times that they did hit something, you saw some max protection. You saw it when Myles Garrett was not in the game and his rotation was in. They were able to get downfield. And then you saw at the end of the game when they were on the 2-yard line, they went for a little slant and go that was wide open, but Trevor didn't have a chance to get to it, and he got sacked for a safety. So they just have to know that they have to come out and get their best players involved. And right now, Evan Ingram, even in week 1, wasn't considered one of their best players that day, and neither was Christian Kirk. And it's perplexing, because you would have thought coming into the year that those guys would be the leaders, and then you sprinkle in and bring Brian Thomas Jr. along slowly. That hasn't materialized. It's clear that he's the most talented weapon on that team other than Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, he's got some vertical elements to his game that are really impressive. And I wondered, me, I'm a draft guy, Tony. Yeah. So I was wondering about Brian Thomas, because you watch him at LSU, it's like, man, this is really good. He can run by everyone and catch the ball down the field, but like, how much more is there to his game? I think that they've already unlocked a lot of that. And I think he's got a lot of potential, and he's certainly shown that through 2 games. Tony, when I think about the keys for the Bills to get their 3rd win of the season, 3 things come to mind. Number 1 for me is that the Bills' offensive tackles need to meet the moment. Bills extended both of their tackles this offseason. Deion Dawkins at left tackle, who I think is developed into one of the premier offensive linemen in the league. And then right tackle Spencer Brown entering his 4th season. He was scheduled to be a free agent after the year, and the Bills went ahead and extended him to a big contract, $18 million a season. You got an expensive pair of tackles. They've been great through 2 games. We're also talking about Arizona, who doesn't have much in the way of edge rushing talent, and Miami, who, Jalen Phillips is a great player, but still coming back from the Achilles, and they don't have Bradley Chubb. They're playing rookies and Emmanuel Ogbah. They haven't been tested like they're going to be tested against Jacksonville with Joshua Hines Allen. So we no longer have Josh Allen and Josh Allen. I threw a celebration for that this offseason, man. That was tough to deal with. And then Trayvon Walker, number 1 pick entering year 3. I think he's kind of really stepping into his his stride here, a player that was always going to need a little time. The appeal there was always the upside with the physical traits. I think you start to see that manifest itself into playmaking. And so that's a big test. It's a new test for this Bills offensive line. And so I think they're going to be really important. So the offensive tackles for the Bills need to meet the moment. Number two is they got to be able to beat man coverage. Like we've already kind of talked about, it's a new test for Buffalo. They've not seen man coverage like this yet this season. And, I think it's obviously going to hurt Jacksonville to not have Tyson Campbell. But, I think one of the fair questions that people might have about the Bills is, do they have wide receivers that can consistently beat man coverage? Well, we're going to find out. Now, I think there's some challenges with playing a lot of man coverage. I think that opens the door for Josh Allen to maybe run the football. Is that offset by, his left hand and the injury that he's kind of playing through there? Is that going to limit his appetite to run? We'll find out. But if receivers can beat man coverage, that's going to be important. I'm looking at Khalil Shakir. I'm looking at Dalton Kincaid, looking at Curtis Samuel as the players that need to be the catalysts in that capacity. Number three for me is disciplined defense. I hate to use the word desperate in week 3, but Tony, they can't fall to 0-3 to Jaguars. That's a tough spot to be. I know that they've gotten out of some holes in the past, right? But that's going to be a really, really tough situation, especially listening to Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence coming out of the Cleveland game and the messaging. It feels like this is a huge moment for Jacksonville in this season. Maybe a road trip against an AFC contender is exactly what they want to get their season on track. And I think the Bills need to be ready for, to some level, a desperate Jacksonville team that's looking to get their, to get the season going. And Doug Peterson, I have questions about him. I think in 2 situations now we've seen the more his fingerprints get on an operation, the worse it gets. I thought he caught lightning in a bottle in 2017. Yeah. And congratulations, they won the Super Bowl. And that's going to get you a lot of opportunity. But I'm concerned how things played out in Philly. I'm concerned how things are playing out in Jacksonville. I will say this, though. He's creative. Yeah. And so what does he have up his sleeve to try to find an edge against the Bills, who have a lot of newness on the defensive side of the football, including having to play several backups in the back 7 due to injuries? And so you better be disciplined and be ready to handle any curveballs that come your way from Doug Peterson and the Jaguars.
Yeah, you made a very interesting point about our defensive linemen. And I could echo that about yours because, with, I hope I say his name correctly, Ebenezer or Epinesa or the kid Boudreaux from Miami. And then Von Miller can still give it to you. He said, he's been showing it that if you forget about him, he's still, I think, a first ballot Hall of Famer with a bullet who still has some stuff in his system. But they just play in a certain way, man. They play. They just have this identity. It's like a computer program, and they're gonna go out and be themselves. That's the reason why I think it's gonna be hard for the Jaguars to win, because they're still searching. Now, in that searching, they're a very talented team that can make explosive plays out of the passing game with Travis Etienne, the run game with Travis Etienne, and of course we mentioned Brian Thomas Jr. And it'll be just my luck and your luck that Christian Kirk steps up and has a big game this week, right? That's usually the way it works. I'm sitting there poo-pooing him, and you asked about him, and then all of a sudden he steps up and he does exactly what you're afraid he might do.
Tony and Joe were great. For more on Tony and Joe, check them out over at Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Bills, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That leaves us with the Cincinnati Bengals in an 0-2 hole already. Again, nothing new there for that team. They'll be looking to get out of that against the Washington Commanders as Jaden Daniels picked up his first career NFL win. So we'll be talking here with James Rapien of Locked On Bengals and David Harrison of Locked On Commanders about everything these two teams need to do to get the win.
It's Bengals and Commanders on Monday Night Football. This crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, David, let's dive into, on the Commanders side, the 3 most important things. If they're going to win, if they're going to improve to 2-1 and send the Bengals to somewhere that, even though they've started 0-2 in back-to-back years, and this is their 3rd straight year at 0-2, they've never started 0-3. So the pressure is on the Bengals to keep that streak going as much as it is the 0-2 starts that they always seem to get off of. But what are the 3 most important things for the Commanders to win on Monday night?
Yeah, man, I think the pressure is on the Bengals. I think that's something to remember heading into this matchup as well. And I think the three things the Commanders got to do: continue to get Jaden Daniels the opportunities to make plays for his offense, and trust that growth is going to continue to be there. Score at least three touchdowns, which might be a tall task. And I think you got to frustrate Jamar Chase. You know what I mean? I think those are the three things. Again, get Jaden Daniels those opportunities to make plays, score those tutties instead of those field goals, and frustrate Jamar Chase in front of his home crowd in primetime.
Yeah, I like it. I think if you're scoring, if you're putting up points, especially early, you're getting, I don't want to say getting in Jamar Chase's head, but getting under his skin a little bit, not allowing him to get going early. Yeah, that's the recipe, especially if you can get that ground game going. And that's that goes into where I'm at. The most important things for the Bengals to win this game. Number one, it starts on offense for me. This offense has to do sort of what it did against the Chiefs, where they did produce some explosive plays. Jermaine Burton had a 47-yard reception. Mike Gesicki had a 30, I think it was 37 yards, but had a really big play as well, 35, something like that, to get them into the red zone. But the thing they didn't do is convert in the red zone, especially early. And so score touchdowns. As simple as it is, it hasn't been easy for the Bengals to do. And even on one of the touchdowns they scored on Sunday, they had to go for it on 4th down inside their own 5 to get it. So you got to score touchdowns and generate explosive plays. That would be number one. Number two is stopping this run game. And that's Jaden Daniels. That's Brian Robinson. That's Austin Eckler out of the backfield. That's all of those things from a pass catching standpoint. I'll group all of those guys together. You can't let that happen and that get going, because if it does, then it's going to potentially open up stuff downfield. And the Bengals have been good at containing that for 2 weeks. It has to be 3. The last thing you want is for Brian Robinson to be running for 5.5 yards per carry or something like that, which isn't crazy when you look at the state of this Bengals defensive line. And then 3, make Jaden Daniels uncomfortable. Get pressure on him. Don't let him stand in the pocket all day. And it's been a mixture, because Trey Hendrickson has been good in back-to-back weeks. Last week, he was able to get to Patrick Mahomes. The week prior, did not get to Jacoby Brissett. They had 1 sack on Brissett, and it was where he kind of slid down and was tagged down by Dax Hill. You need to get some pressure on the rookie, make him feel it early. So he's questioning things a bit. And I wonder if they can. Well, I know they can do it. I wonder if they will do it. And so if they can get pressure on him early and slow down the run, I think that would be huge.
You know, I think if the Washington Commanders make one request in that stadium on Monday night, it would be, don't play the Monday Night Football music. Because here's the thing. Jaden Daniels is a cool cat, right? I've actually had this analogy all through training camp. I shared it with Jaden's mother, and she loved it. She's like, it was spot on. And I said, Jaden's the kind of dude that if he wakes up one day and his house is on fire, he's going to collect all of his valuables. He's going to collect whatever pets or anything that he loves in his house. And he's going to walk very slowly out of his house, because nothing gets this dude to panic. Like, nothing makes this guy panic. But again, first NFL game on the road, you saw that clock speed up. Again, I don't get to I don't get to the level where I say he was panicking, but you definitely saw that clock was running very, very fast internally. It's your first primetime game. It's your first Monday Night Football game. And any football fan grew up watching Monday Night Football. You hear that Monday Night Football music, and James, I mean, you're human, man. It just does something to you, and you're in the jungle. You got these Bengals fans. Yeah, man. So, I mean, Jaden's got to keep that poise. So far, he's been able to keep it. I haven't yet to see a moment where I'm like, all right, he shook a little bit. But if there's an opportunity so far in his career, this is definitely the biggest one. And if the Bengals can get after him early and maybe get a big explosive from Jamar Chase, right? Because nothing gets a young quarterback going more. And you see that other quarterback, that other LSU Heisman quarterback, throw a deep touchdown pass. You want to go out there and you want to match him 1-for-1. That's obviously the biggest leg up. But for the Commanders, there would be nothing greater for them than to hear Bengals fans booing at the half, right? That would be the biggest coup for them to get in during this game, because that gives you the leverage coming into the second half, and that's exactly what they're looking to do. And yeah, I mean, I think like you said, Brian Robinson, they were able to run the ball really well against Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and this banged up Cincinnati Bengals front man. I'm just wondering, is it just going to be more of the same? Because I mean, 7 drives, 7 possessions, 8 if you count the kneel down at halftime, but 7 real drives for the Washington Commanders. Usually you get like 12 in an NFL game. they definitely look to reduce that game against the New York Giants. So if they're looking to do that against the Giants, they're going to look to do it against the Bengals.
Yeah, and so starting fast in a game like that, where it is slower and there are going to be fewer possessions, the Bengals have to start fast. And that's one of the things that the Patriots did so well, is they got off to their start and it was just kind of 7-0, and it's just kind of lulling, and that's what it was. And then you look up and it's like, man, if they don't score here, they're down 2 scores. If they don't score here, the game's over and they're going to lose to New England. And that happened. And I'm not comparing Commanders fans. I'm not comparing the Patriots to the Commanders. I think the Commanders are a better team. But the point is the same. If you can shorten the game, get off to a good start, take the crowd out of it a little bit, then man, that is the recipe. And just going back to what I said earlier, the pressure is on the Bengals because they can not dismiss. And Joe Burrow certainly didn't dismiss the 0-2. I mean, he was as frustrated and as frustrated is the word I'll use. Frustrated as I've ever seen him outside of maybe Super Bowl 56. And so it's not like he's brushing off 0-2, but I think there are some people that are like, all right, they've been in this position. They know how to respond, but you still got to go respond. And that's what I think is important here. If you're the Commanders, you want to plant that seed of doubt midway through the first quarter and then have that doubt just extend midway through the second quarter. And then, like you said, does it get to halftime where there's real pressure mounting? I do wonder now, do I expect the Bengals to come out and play well? I do, but there is no doubt more pressure on them going into this game. It's a must win because if you fall to 0-3, it's really, really tough to envision the scenario where they find their way into the playoffs of the AFC.
Yeah, no, I 100%. It is a must win for the Bengals. It's definitely a want to win. I kind of talked to Commanders fans. The over under preseason was 6.5 wins for the season, and I said I think they hit the over, but I kind of have them right at 7 wins. And there were 8 games against playoff teams last year. There were 2 games against teams with winning records that missed the playoffs. And I said the Commanders need to split those 2 games, go 1-1. This is the first one of those games. So if they can win this one, you get that split out of the way. You already have that split in the bag, going away for the rest of the season. So if you can pull this off, and again, all the pressure is on Cincinnati because just look at the spread, man. Washington is not supposed to win this game. And no offense intended for anybody, but in the grand scheme of the NFL community and the national ecosystem of football, Commanders fans know it. The Patriots and Commanders are kind of in that same community. They're in that same group of teams that nobody really respects and thinks much of. You beat the Cincinnati Bengals, and as much as Commander fans would love to say, well, now the national media will talk about Washington. No, actually what they'll do is they'll talk about how bad Cincinnati may actually be this season, which is why there's even more pressure on the Bengals.
David and James are great. For more on David and James, check them out. David on Locked On Commanders, James on Locked On Bengals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on this Ultimate NFL pregame show, Week 3 edition. We get you ready for the games here, key matchups, big concerns, questions, and everything else you need to know heading into Sunday and Monday's games. So hopefully a good stretch of games on the docket here, and we will be back here next week for the Ultimate NFL pregame show. Week number 4 is we'll start to get a little bit more of an idea of what the NFL looks like, which teams are contenders, which teams are pretenders, and a lot more. So be sure to subscribe, follow along both in video form and audio form here on the Ultimate NFL pregame show. And we'll see you back here for week 4. Enjoy your Sunday, enjoy the games, and we'll see you back here soon.